Chapter 4450. Although Gu Ling Wuji had only stripped off one of the spirit lattice runes on the stone statue, Nye Tian already felt that it was not bad. Calm Tot the very least. He could use this rune to see if the soul lattice rune had any effect on the soul of Yellow Springs. Gu Ling Wuqi and Nye Tian came to Tang 13's side. The latter was still unconscious. Nye Tian sensed for a moment and confirmed that Tang 13's breathing was steady and there was nothing out of the ordinary. He nodded and signaled Gu Ling Wuji to begin. Ancient Ling Wuji nodded solemnly and took a deep breath, appearing slightly nervous. He twirled his palm in the air and carefully guided the soul lattice seal into Tang 13's body. Boom! The moment the inscription entered her body, Tang 13's body trembled slightly. A low rumbling sound could be heard as a layer of white light appeared around her body. It was as though her soul had left her body. Not good. Seeing this, Gu Ling Wuji's face changed as he exclaimed in shock. Raising his hand, he quickly removed the runes from the spirit lattice. Senior Gu Ling, what happened? Things changed too quickly. Nye Tian didn't understand what was going on, but seeing Gu Ling Wuji's strange expression, he couldn't help but ask nervously. Ancient Ling Wuqi first inspected Tang 13's condition. Only after confirming that there was nothing wrong did he relax. Letting out a long breath, he said, "The runes of the soul grid really do affect the spirit of the Yellow Springs. If the runes are strong enough, there is a chance that the spirit of the Yellow Springs will be forced out. But the soul of Nether has already grown. If I force it, I might force Tang 13's soul out of her body." This. Nye Tian's expression changed, and he froze on the spot. If Tang 13's soul and Hades' soul were forced out, wouldn't this body become a soulless body? Currently, if we want to use the soul lattice runes to force out the soul of Yellow Springs, we must first find a way to strengthen Tang 13's soul. Gu Ling Wuji thought for a long time and said, "Or, when Tang 13's soul is forced out, we can guide it back into the body. Which method is safer?" Nye Tian's eyes trembled as he asked. Both methods are risky, but the first one is relatively simpler. Gu Ling Wuji pondered and nodded. "We still have 3 days. Qingqi should be here soon. Let's have a good discussion then. Senior Qingqi will be coming as well." "That's great." Nye Tian was overjoyed when he heard that Qingqi was coming. With the help of Qingqi and Gu Ling Wuqi, the chances of saving Tang 13 will increase. And furthermore, if Qingqi came, the other star venerates might come as well. This would be a great stabilizing factor for the wind beacon selection. Nye Sky temporarily handed Tang 13 over to Gu Ling Wuji and then returned to his room. In the room, Nye Tian sat cross-legged and quickly entered a state of cultivation. Nye Tian hoped that he would be able to break through to the Heaven Perception stage before the selection of the Heaven Flame Tower sect began. Come to think of it, he had already stayed in the 9th level of Heavenly Tribulation for a period of time. For ordinary people, it was normal for them to stay in the 9th stage of Heavenly Tribulation for decades, centuries, or even tens of thousands of years. However, Nye Tian was different. Ever since his rebirth, his cultivation speed had been extremely shocking. Nye Sky circulated the 9 extremes war god art. The power in his body circulated like a surging flood, boundless and boundless like the starry sky. A cultivator's cultivation was originally a heaven-defying path. They used their own strength to fight against heaven and earth. With the higher a cultivator's realm, the stronger they became, the more terrifying their martial body would become. Basically, when a cultivator reached the sage realm, their martial body would age extremely slowly. That was why sage realm cultivators could live for hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. And moreover, the martial body of a sage realm cultivator was also extremely strong. Even a landslide or tsunami would not be able to hurt them. As for peak Sage Realm cultivators, they could even use their martial body to resist the space-time storm of the Sage Realm. Nye Sky's realm was the 9th level of Heavenly Tribulation, but the strength of his martial body surpassed most sky martial sacred ancestors. It was basically comparable to a high-level sacred ancestor. And when Nye Tian activated the god-demon body, his martial body was enough to fight against a peak sacred ancestor. The power in Nye Tian's body circulated like raging waves, flowing through his limbs and meridians, washing away the impurities in his martial body. At the same time, it was also a kind of training for his martial body. Gather the Yuan meridians and break through the limits of the heavenly tribulation. Nye Tian roared inwardly. Immediately, the power of the 9 heavenly tribulations surged out of his body like raging dragons. In the blink of an eye, his 9 Yuan meridians rumbled, as if they were about to tear his martial body apart. Intense pain spread throughout his body. Nye Tian was drenched in sweat, but he ignored it. Instead, he circulated the power of the heavenly tribulation even more frantically, wanting to break through the limits and ascend to heavenly perception. The heavenly perception Holy Emperor awakened the power of heavenly perception in a cultivator's body. They would have a new perception and understanding of heaven and earth. Not only could it improve the cultivator's martial body, but it could also improve the cultivator's understanding and control of power. Nieskai endured the pain in his body and continued to break through the limits of the heavenly tribulation. Faintly, he seemed to feel that there was a strange power within his body. It was like a thin membrane that covered his 9 Yuan meridians. It's the heavenly perception barrier. Nye Tian was overjoyed when he felt the existence of this membrane. Although the heavenly perception realm was a new realm to him. However, he had fought with many heavenly perception martial artists, and Fat Cat had also systematically and in detail explained the heavenly perception realm to him. Sky, the heavenly perception barrier, was the obstacle to breaking through to the heavenly perception realm. At the same time, it was also a sign of a breakthrough. Only when a martial artist was extremely close to the breakthrough point, the heavenly perception barrier would appear. Nieskai was a little excited. The power of the heavenly tribulation in his body was like a dragon or a tiger, surging and fierce, constantly attacking the heavenly perception barrier. However, the thin layer of barrier was extremely tough. No matter how hard Nye Tian attacked, it could not be broken. Unknowingly, Nye Tian's entire body was drenched in sweat. His veins were bulging, and there were even godly demon inscriptions at the corner of his eyes. Nye Tian, don't be anxious. Use your heart to feel the heavenly perception barrier, hold your breath, and attack with all your might, Fat Cat suddenly said. His deep voice resounded in Nye Tian's mind like a clap of thunder. Sky tribulation, heavenly perception, and sky martial arts realms were collectively known as the Paragon Saint realm. For ordinary martial artists, when they reached the Paragon Saint realm, even breaking through a small realm was a huge bottleneck, let alone breaking through a large realm. Many talented martial artists had to go through dozens of failures to break through to the heavenly perception realm. Yet was already very good that the heavenly perception barrier appeared on his first attempt. Small Fat Cat did not expect Nye Tian to break through on his first attempt. He only hoped that Nye Tian would have a clearer understanding of the heavenly perception barrier, so that he could build a foundation for his next attempt. But at this moment, Nye Tian's body suddenly shook, and a cracking sound rang out. When little Fat Cat heard this voice, its eyes widened and it was instantly stunned. This sound was clearly the sound of a barrier breaking. Could it be that Nye Tian had broken through? Chapter 44:51. Fat Cat suddenly heard the sound of a barrier being broken, and it was very clear. He was shocked and stunned. Could it be that Nye Tian had broken through the barrier of heaven's perception on his first attempt? Fat Cat was just thinking that it didn't matter if Nye Tian couldn't break through the barrier this time. At least he could build a foundation for his next breakthrough. He didn't expect Nye Tian to break through the barrier successfully. Pfft. But at that moment, Nye Tian's body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body tilted and he fainted. What's going on? The sudden situation surprised Fat Cat. He didn't know what was going on. Niet Yanming had broken through the barrier successfully. He should have advanced to the heavenly insight realm. Why did he faint instead? Given the strength of Nie Tian's martial body, it would take a terrifying amount of power to knock him out. Could it be that something happened to Nie Tian when he broke through the barrier? Fat Cat was shocked. After he calmed down, he carefully sensed Nie Tian's martial body but didn't find anything strange. But the strange thing was that Nie Tian didn't advance to the heavenly insight realm. He was still in the 9th stage of the heavenly tribulation realm. How is this possible? Fat Cat was shocked and confused. Just the sound of a barrier breaking just now was definitely the sound of someone breaking through the barrier. Since he had broken through the barrier, he should have advanced to the heavenly insight realm. Why was he still in the 9th stage of the heavenly tribulation realm? Small Fat Cat was unwilling to give up. He checked Nie Tian again but still didn't find anything strange. The Ghost Emperor isn't here. Otherwise, someone would have discussed it. Fat Cat couldn't help but think of the Ghost Emperor. What's going on? Only after half a day did Nie Tian finally wake up. However, his entire body felt very weak, and he even felt a little dizzy. Half a day was an extremely long recovery period for Nie Tian, who had the 10th vital meridian. Even if he was seriously injured, half a day would be enough for him to fully recover. But now, he could actually recover. Nie Tian, what happened just now? Fat Cat asked eagerly when she saw that Nie Tian had woken up. I don't know. Nie Tian, however, shook his head. He recalled the moment before he fainted and said, I sensed the existence of the heavenly perception barrier, so I did as you said and gathered my strength to break it. I saw myself breaking through the heavenly perception barrier, but in the next instant, an even larger barrier appeared and directly attacked my Yuan meridian, causing me to faint. Another barrier? Little Fat Cat was shocked and stunned for a moment. In order to break through to the heavenly insight realm, one only needed to break through the heavenly insight barrier. Why was there another barrier after breaking through the barrier for Nie Tian? Could it be that there was another hidden barrier behind the heavenly perception barrier? That was this hidden barrier the second heavenly perception barrier? Or something else? That barrier pressed down on my Yuan meridian, causing my vital meridian to circulate slowly. Nie Tian took a deep breath and felt that his breathing was much smoother. His Yuan meridian and vital meridian had also returned to normal. But he still didn't understand. What was going on? The Fat Cat didn't speak for a long time. Clearly, she couldn't explain. After a while, Nie Tian felt that he had recovered quite a bit. He took a deep breath and said, Why don't I try again and see if I can break through the second barrier? Don't mess around. The Fat Cat shouted in shock and hurriedly stopped Nie Tian. That the second hidden barrier was too terrifying. A light pressure could make Nie Tian faint for half a day. It was no small matter. It would be too dangerous to touch that mysterious barrier again without knowing what was going on. The Fat Cat explained to Nie Tian. The latter calmed down and gave up on trying to break through again. Then in the next 2 days, apart from arranging some sect matters, Nie Tian mainly dealt with the beacon sky selection. He focused on his own cultivation. After adjusting his martial body to its best condition, Nie Tian was ready to try again. But before he was ready to start, he sensed a familiar aura, which made him pleasantly surprised. Pushing the door open, 2 figures appeared in front of Nie Tian. It was Gu Ling Wu Qi and Qing Qi. Senior Qing Qi, Senior Gu Ling, Nie Tian saw the two and greeted them enthusiastically. Nie Tian, I already know about the Feng Tian sect. Qing Qi said calmly, but you're so high profile. I'm afraid you'll attract many enemies. This is an opportunity for the Feng Tian sect. I'm confident that as long as I'm in the Feng Tian sect, I won't be afraid no matter how many enemies come. Nie Tian was very confident and smiled faintly. Qing Qi nodded and said, Gu Ling showed me around just now. I didn't expect the Feng Tian sect to have such a deep foundation. I've only heard that the Heaven Beacon sect once ruled the all-heaven sacred world for a short period of time in the past. I thought it was just a short-lived sect. Now that I'm here, I realize that the Feng Tian sect is not to be underestimated. Nie Tian nodded slightly, not surprised by Qing Qi's reaction. Qing Qi's a formation master. He could naturally see the terror of the Beacon Sky formation. With the Beacon Sky formation, once it was activated, even the human emperor's palace might not be able to take down the Feng Tian sect. Feng the Beacon Sky formation was also Nie Tian's confidence. Although the formation could not be fully activated, the stone statues were enough to protect the sect in times of danger. Senior Qing Qi, have you seen Tang 13? How is she? Nie Tian was more concerned about Tang 13's situation. Qing Qi might have a way, but Qing Qi's expression didn't look too good. He shook his head and said, I has already seen it. The yellow spring soul in his body is too terrifying, and it is still growing. Just now, I and Gu Ling worked together and used the soul lattice runes to suppress the soul of Yellow Springs. However, they won't be able to suppress it for too long, at most a few days. Could it be that I can only turn to the Devil's Knight for help? Nie Tian frowned and sighed in his heart. Tang 13 was still unconscious. If there was no other choice, he would have to ask Devil's Knight to help. There's still some time. We're not in a desperate situation yet. Qing Qi forced a smile and comforted Nie Tian. Nie Tian could only laugh bitterly. In his opinion, they were almost at the end of their rope. Seniors, there's something I don't understand, and I'd like to consult you about it. Nie Tian suddenly thought of the heavenly perception barrier, and so he explained the entire matter. Outside of the heavenly perception barrier, there's another barrier. This is unheard of. Gu Ling shook his head with a confused expression. It was obvious that he had never heard of such a thing. Qing Qi, on the other hand, was silent for a long time as if he was thinking about something. Senior Qing Qi, could it be that this hidden barrier is something? Nie Tian saw that Qing Qi's expression was strange and asked with a heated gaze. Qing Qi lifted his head to look at Nie Tian. He seemed to be a little hesitant, but in the end, he opened his mouth and said, I have indeed heard of something like this, but I don't know how trustworthy that person is. Who? Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he asked curiously. Chapter 44-52. Nie Tian's heart tightened when he saw the change in Qing Qi's expression. Hayakuten. Qing Qi hesitated for a while before saying the name. Ultimate Martial Evil Heaven. When Nie Tian heard this name, his expression couldn't help but change. He was extremely surprised. He didn't expect the person Qing Qi mentioned to be Hayakuten. Jiwu Xietian was the previous sacred lord, Dongwang Zhengrong's 9th star emissary. He was also the strongest star lord, Lonely Sky Star Lord Ziwei. And Hayakuten also had a taboo identity, the dark side of Dongwang Zhengrong. Strange Qing Qi's expression changed. So this matter was related to Hayakuten. Nie Tian calmed down and asked in a low voice, What did he say, Senior Qing Qi? Qing hesitated for a while before saying, Nie Tian, don't ask for now. I will tell you when the time is right. Nie Tian frowned. He wanted to say something but stopped in the end. Nie Tian, don't try to break through to the heavenly enlightenment realm for now. Qing Qi looked at Nie Tian and said seriously. Nie Tian was somewhat confused. Don't tell me that there's something wrong with the second ward? Qing Qi's expression was strange. The second barrier wasn't simple. Perhaps. Qing Qi sighed. It's better not to touch it before we get to the bottom of it. Fine. Nie Tian nodded helplessly. It seemed that the second barrier did have its own secret. Qing's attitude was the same as Fat Cat's. They clearly didn't want Nie Tian to take the risk. Beacon King, have you decided on the location for the selection? Gu Ling asked after noticing the strange atmosphere. Not yet. Nie Tian shook his head. The news of the Sky Beacon selection has spread to the various sacred realms. It will officially start in about half a month. Senior Guling, where do you think is the most suitable location for the venue? Gu Ling Wuji pondered for a while and said, the Sky Beacon selection has caused a huge commotion and will definitely attract the attention of various forces. The Sky Beacon selection must be held in a place we can control. Nie Tian nodded in agreement. Fong for the heavens selection to reach this stage was no longer a simple matter. This time, in addition to some forces from the sacred world of 7 cultivators of true virtue, other forces would also participate. There were even many forces from mid-rank, high-rank, and even top-rank sacred world. Therefore, the location of the Sky Beacon selection was extremely important. Once something happened, the Feng Tian sect had to control it immediately. Since Gu Ling Wuji asked this question, he must have a suitable idea in mind. Sir Beacon Emperor, what do you think about the strength of these forces in the 7th cultivator of true virtue? Gu Ling Wuji did not directly say it, but rather asked in a somewhat inexplicable manner. Very strong. Nie Tian nodded and said, the 7th cultivator of true virtue is only a low-rank sacred world, but the forces in this sacred world are not weaker than many peak forces in high-rank sacred worlds. This point made Nie Tian feel a bit strange. 7. The sacred world of true virtue was only a low-rank sacred world, but its peak experts were actually close to the peak of the Sky Martial Realm. It must be known that in many high-rank sacred worlds, there were very few Sky Martial sacred ancestors. However, the Gia sect, the Heaven Beacon sect, and even the Wind Demons clan and the One clan all had many Sky Martial sacred ancestors. This was indeed puzzling. The reason why the 7th cultivator of true virtue is so strong is inseparable from its special location. Gu Ling Wuji laughed and explained. The various sacred worlds of the sacred world are divided into top rank, high rank, mid rank, and low rank. This division is based on the location of the sacred world. According to the region, the 7th cultivator of true virtue is a low-rank sacred world. However, its location is very unique. It's right at the core of the primary saint domain cluster. And in this core area, there was a huge unique spacetime that connected top saint realm, high saint realm, intermediate saint realm, and elementary saint realm. This special spacetime is called the Heavenspan region. The 7th cultivator's sacred world happens to be in the Heavenly Passage domain, so its spacetime is connected to the Muyan sacred world, Huangyu sacred world, and Nanhuang sacred world. Tian immediately understood and said, in that case, the spacetime of the 7th cultivator of true virtue's sacred world is actually no different from the top sacred world, the Southern Brilliant sacred world, right? The saint power in the spacetime is still slightly weaker than in the Southern Brilliance sacred world, but it is far stronger than ordinary elementary sacred world. It is about the same as ordinary advanced sacred world. Gu Ling Wuji faintly smiled and continued, it is precisely because of the special geographical location of the 7th cultivator's sacred world that this sacred world has always been a place that major forces have to fight for. Could it be that the Gia sect has an even greater force supporting it? Nie Tian frowned and had an ominous feeling in his heart. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, for the Gia sect to be able to rise in such a short time, there must be a major force supporting it from behind. Over the past millions of years, the sacred world has not remained the same. Instead, it has been slowly evolving. Although the evolution of the sacred world is very slow, its influence is huge. Some people have already felt that the connection between the various sacred worlds is getting closer and closer, and the major sacred worlds are slowly getting closer. Getting closer? Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned and somewhat confused. They are getting closer. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, some people have already measured it and found that the distance between the various sacred worlds is slowly shrinking. Therefore, tens of thousands of years ago, some people proposed the theory that the sacred worlds are collapsing, which is called the collapse of the heavens theory. Moreover, by observing the evolution of the various sacred worlds, they came to the conclusion that the speed of the collapse of the heavens is accelerating. Nie Tian and Qing Qi were stunned at the same time. The two of them had never heard of such a shocking theory. For example, if the collapse of the heavens was real, it would probably cause great panic in the sacred world. Gu Ling, the all-heaven sacred realms have been connected since a long time ago. If the all-heaven sacred realms are really collapsing, does that mean that the all-heaven sacred realms will once again become one? Qing Qi frowned and voiced his thoughts. If the sacred worlds are only merging into one, it's not a big deal. It might not even be a bad thing. Gu Ling Wuji smiled bitterly and said, but according to the current speed of the collapse, the sacred worlds are not merging into one, but will rapidly merge together. At first, there might be a collision between the sacred worlds. After that, the colliding sacred worlds will merge into one, and the space-time inside will collapse and merge. The final result is very likely to be a space-time black hole. Space-time black hole. Nie Tian and Qing Qi's eyes trembled at the same time. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said heavily, if the space-time black hole is the final destination of the sacred worlds, then all living beings in the sacred worlds will be completely annihilated. Chapter 4453. Annihilation. Nie Tian and Qing Qi's expressions changed at the same time when they heard the last two words. Gu Ling Wuji went silent for a moment before letting out a long sigh. Gu Ling Wuji pondered for a moment before letting out a long sigh. Some people have already deduced the theory of the collapse of the heavens many times, but the final result was the annihilation of the heavens. Qing Qi calmed down a bit and couldn't help but ask, Gu Ling, how do you know about this? He had been in charge of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion for a long time, but he had never heard of such a shocking theory. How did Gu Ling Wuji know about it? Gu Ling Wuji sighed with a helpless expression. In fact, ever since I left the Heavenly Fate sect, I have been secretly investigating the collapse of the heavens. I personally participated in 2 of the deductions and personally witnessed the destruction of the sacred world. Impossible. However, Qing Qi frowned. As the pavilion master of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, how come I have never heard of such an organization that specializes in researching the collapse of the heavens? Moreover, if such an organization really exists, its members should all be formation masters, right? Most of the top formation masters in the sacred world are in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Even if there are some who are not in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, I still have a good relationship with them. If these formation masters are researching the collapse of the heavens, there is no way I wouldn't know about it. Tian's eyes trembled slightly. He also felt that Qing Qi's words made sense. Brother Qing Qi, those people basically come from a mysterious force. I have only come into contact with them by chance. Gu Ling Wuji looked at Qing Qi and shook his head. He did not reveal too much information. Nie Tian saw that Gu Ling Wuji was in a difficult position, so he didn't pursue the matter and asked, Senior Gu Ling, even if the collapse of the heavens is true, what does it have to do with the Heavenly Fate selection? When he was discussing the location of the Heavenly Fate selection with Gu Ling Wuji, the latter introduced the location of the sacred world of 7 cultivators in detail and then talked about the collapse of the heavens. The speed at which the sacred world of 7 cultivators is collapsing is accelerating, and the sacred world of 7 cultivators is located at the center of the sacred world of 7 cultivators. Gu Ling Wuji frowned and said, the collapse of the heavens will continue. Due to its special location, the sacred world of 7th cultivators will be the least affected. Moreover, it will also be the last region to collapse. Senior Gu Ling means that due to the collapse of the heavens, the 7th cultivator of true virtue's sacred world will become more and more important. As such, it may attract various forces to compete for it, right? Nie Tian immediately understood, and worry flashed in his eyes. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, If it was the normal 7th cultivator's sacred world of 7 cultivators, it might have attracted the attention of some high-rank sacred world forces at most. But now, it's very likely that the forces of top-rank sacred worlds will intervene. Qing Chi's face stiffened and he was momentarily stunned. Who would have thought that a small sky beacon selection would have such a huge problem? As the collapse of the heavens worsened, the 7th cultivator sacred world would become more and more important. Naturally, it would attract the attention of various forces. If that was the case, the Fengtian sect would not just face the threat of a few organizations. Instead, it would face the pressure of the entire All-Heaven Saints world. Monster no wonder, Gu Ling Wuji rushed back to the sect because he had expected this. After calming down, Nie Tian asked tentatively, Senior Guling, not many people know about the collapse of the heavens, right? The collapse of the heavens was too shocking. Once news of it spread, it would definitely cause chaos. Both, however, even Qing Chi didn't know about the collapse of the heavens, so there must be very few people who knew about it. Not many. Gu Ling Wuji nodded slightly and said, but as far as I knows, several peak forces have already found out about it. I reckon that they will act against the 7th cultivator of true cultivators. If that's the case, then I'll have to be very careful in choosing the location of the sky beacon selection. Nie Tian bitterly smiled. He was already prepared for the worst. Beacon Sovereign, I've already thought of a few locations, but… Gu Ling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Senior Guling, if you have anything to say, just say it. Nie Tian said after seeing Gu Ling Wuji's reaction. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, previously, I had already brought the Beacon Emperor here to take a look. The Fengtian sect has a total of 720 peaks, among which there are 108 perilous peaks. Among these 108 perilous peaks, there are 36 forbidden peaks. Senior Guling, are you saying that the sky beacon selection will be held in the forbidden peak? Before Guling Wuji could finish, Nie Tian had already understood what he was trying to say. The 36 peaks corresponded to the 36 death acupuncture points in the human body. Institute the so-called death acupoint was a fatal acupoint. If it received an abnormal external force, it could be fatal. Death with such an acupoint, it was easy to imagine what the forbidden peak was like. Nie Tian guessed that the forbidden peak must be one of the forbidden areas of the Fengtian sect, and it must be extremely dangerous. Ancient Ling Wuqi's intention in choosing Forbidden Peak as the venue for the sky beacon selection was very obvious. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, since the sacred world of 7th cultivators is a place that all the forces will fight for, we might as well take the risk and hold the sky beacon selection at the Forbidden Peak just in case. If the situation changes, we'll kill everyone in the Forbidden Peak, said Nie Tian. Heaven could feel the coldness and ruthlessness in Gu Ling Wuji's eyes and couldn't help but tremble. This was the first time he felt such a strong killing intent from Gu Ling Wuji. Original come on, this seemingly amiable old man also had a vicious and ruthless side. This was normal. Since Gu Ling Wuji was able to become the Fengtian sect's sect master, he was naturally not a good person. Moreover, this was also for the sake of the Fengtian sect. Seeing that Nie Tian didn't speak for a long time, Gu Ling Wuji couldn't help but ask, Sir Beacon Emperor, what do you think? At this moment, Nie Tian's weak side was revealed. He was too merciful. No wouldn't take extreme measures unless it was absolutely necessary. Nie Tian, I agree with Guling's suggestion. At this moment, Qing Chi also spoke up, agreeing with Gu Ling Wuji's suggestion. Although he did not know what the Forbidden Peak meant, Gu Ling Wuji's suggestion was undoubtedly safer. Senior Gu Ling, Senior Qing Chi, this matter is too big for me to decide alone. At the very least, I need to discuss it with the Beacon's Emperor. Nie Tian nodded after a moment of silence. There is no need for further discussion. I agree to hold the sky beacon selection at the Forbidden Peak. But just as he finished speaking, A cold laughter came from afar, and then a figure descended like a ghost. It was Devil's Night. Devil's Night? Nye Tian was surprised to see Devil's Night suddenly appear. Mo Yi had stopped by the Feng Tian Fate sect for a while, but he only took a look at the sect and didn't enter. After that, Devil's Night claimed that he had gone to the Gia sect, but no one expected him to come back so soon. Why, are you surprised to see me? Devil's Night smiled faintly, then glanced at Qing Qi and Gu Lingwuji. He couldn't help but smile. One is a Star Lord, the other is the Feng Tian Fate sect's sect master. It seems that both of you have a deep relationship with me. Qing Qi and Gu Lingwuji stared at Devil's Night with dark expressions. Chapter 44-54. Devil's Night looked at Qing Qi and Gu Lingwuji. The latter two were also sizing him up. The three of them had different expressions and were deep in thought. Just as Devil's Night said, Qing Qi and Gu Lingwuji were related to him. Qing Qi was a Star Lord, while Devil's Night was derived from the starry sky Holy Lord Nye Tian. Gu Lingwuji was the sect master of the Feng Tian Fate sect, while Devil's Night was the Feng Tian Beacon's emperor. The relationship between the two was indeed deep. Qing Qi looked at Devil's Night. Even though he already knew the other party's identity, he was still very shocked. Before he met Devil's Night, Qing Qi already knew of his existence. He even speculated that Devil's Night's potential was even more terrifying than Hyakuten's, and that he would grow to become an existence that surpassed Hyakuten in the future. For at that time, Qing Qi even warned Nye Tian that he must kill Devil's Night. Now that he saw Devil's Night with his own eyes, Qing Qi understood that he had underestimated the former. The mutation of the power of the stars in Devil's Night was greater than he expected. This also meant that Devil's Night's talent and potential were even stronger. Gu Lingwuji had a similar feeling to Qing Qi. What shocked him was that he actually could not see through Devil's Night's soul lattice. When he tried to sense Devil's Night's soul lattice, he felt as though he had fallen into a boundless ocean. He could not see the edge at all. Could it be that Devil's Night's soul lattice had already surpassed his? But Devil's Night was so young, how could he have such a strong soul lattice? The two of you have seen enough, right? If it's possible, let's go to the various forbidden peaks to take a look. After a while, Devil's Night said with a faint smile. Qing Qi and Gu Lingwuji finally reacted. They looked slightly embarrassed. Let's go. Nye Tian nodded helplessly. The four of them were silent on the way. Nye Tian, what do you think about Tang 13? Devil's Night suddenly asked when they were about to reach a forbidden peak. Where is your puppet one? And Senior Wenho, you didn't bring him back? Nye Tian deliberately avoided the question and asked in a cold tone. Ce has gone on a mission. As for Wenho, I've already negotiated with the Gia sect. Wenho has been brought back to the Wen clan by the great elder of the Wen clan, Devil's Night replied with a faint smile. Wen Qingmu. Nye Tian's eyes trembled as Wen Qingmu's face appeared in his mind. He immediately recalled that Wen Qingmu had also gone to Gia sect previously. As the great elder of the Wen clan, Wen Qingmu's position was unclear. Wenho had been taken away by Wen Qingmu, and no one knew if he was safe or not. Even if Wen Qingmu had really joined the Gia sect, he would not do anything to harm Wenho before they had a falling out. Fallets, Devil's Night. I didn't expect him to really go to Gia sect and come back alive. Tang 13 doesn't have much time left. You need to make a decision quickly. If it's too late, I won't be able to save him. Devil's Night once again brought up Tang 13. His words were laced with a strong sense of threat. I got it. Nye Tianling said coldly and ignored Devil's Night. This is the 100 Poison Peak. The mountain gate is filled with poison arrays. Any cultivator who enters will have their strength suppressed, Gu Lingwuji introduced as the four arrived at the 100 Poison Peak. No. Without waiting for the others to speak, Devil's Night said cold. Ancient Lingwuji frowned and looked at Nye Tian. The latter nodded and signaled for him to continue to the next peak. In the Divine Gate Peak, there are 9 divine gates of the mysterious tomb. Once it is activated, at least 9 Sky Martial Saint ancestors must work together to break it, Gu Ling Wuji explained as he came to the next peak, observing Devil's Knight's reaction. Not bad, but the place is a little small. Keep it as a backup. Devil's Knight glanced at the Divine Gate Peak and said calmly. Ancient Ling Wuchi's frown deepened. In his opinion, the Divine Gate Peak should be one of the best places for the Sky Beacon selection. The Divine Gate Peak was protected by a formation, and there were 9 divine gates of the mysterious tomb. If anything were to happen, at least everyone would be trapped inside. However, Devil's Knight only glanced at it briefly and said it could only be a backup. It was too reckless and arbitrary. Nyeheaven glanced at Gu Ling Wuchi and signaled for him to not be angry and continue to observe. The Azure Darkness Peak is protected by the Azure Darkness Grand Formation, and it's filled with the Azure Darkness Sword Insight. In next to no time, they arrived at another forbidden peak, and Gu Ling Wuji had just started to accept it when he was interrupted by Mo Yi. No. Devil's Knight only said 2 words, calm and overbearing. Beacon's Emperor, you only glanced at the Green Hell Peak and you said no. Aren't you being too arbitrary? Gu Ling Wuchi couldn't take it anymore and asked in a cold tone. You only need to show me a few more peaks. You don't need to express your opinion. The decision lies with me and Nye Tian. Devil's Knight glanced at Gu Ling Wuchi indifferently and said coldly. You. Gu Ling Wuchi was so angry that his face turned green and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Gu Ling, there's no harm in looking at a few more peaks. Qing Qi came forward and persuaded. Gu Ling Wuchi's old face was gloomy, but he finally nodded. Except. Then, the 4 of them looked at a dozen more peaks, but they were all rejected by Devil's Knight. The Fengtian sect had a total of 36 peaks. They had seen half of them, but only the Divine Gate Peak could barely be considered as an alternative. Beacon's Emperor, what kind of peak do you want? Gu Ling Wuchi really couldn't take it anymore. He raised his eyebrows and asked. First, the space inside the peak must be big enough. Second, the defense formation of the peak must be strong and not difficult to activate. Third, if an accident happens, the peak must have absolute confidence to control the situation. Fourth, which is also the most important point, if the peak is destroyed, it must not threaten the entire Heavenly Beacon's formation. Devil's Knight didn't look at Gu Ling Wuchi and said coldly. This. Gu Ling Wuchi was stunned after hearing the 4 points and couldn't say a word. Although the first dozen peaks had their own advantages, none of them fulfilled the 4 conditions that Devil's Knight mentioned. Devil's Knight had already prepared for the worst. He even thought of the peak being destroyed. However, compared to the entire Heavenly Beacon's formation, the peak was equivalent to a human's Achilles heel. If the Achilles heel was destroyed, the consequences would be fatal. Gu Ling sect leader, bring me to see the 6 Yang Peak. After a while, Devil's Knight's expression softened and he said in a deep voice, 6 Yang Peak. Gu Ling Wuchi's expression suddenly changed, and he was shocked when he heard those 3 words. Nye Tian's heart sank when he saw that. He couldn't help but wonder if there was something mysterious about the 6 Yang Peak. Why? Can't I? Devil's Knight's expression darkened and he asked cold. Beacon's Emperor, do you know what the 6 Yang Peak means to the entire Fengtian sect? Gu Ling Wuchi calmed down and asked in a deep voice. I already know the Heavenly Beacon's formation like the back of my hand. Naturally, I know the importance of the 6 Yang Peak. However, Mo Yi laughed and said in a conceited manner, since I mentioned the 6 Suns Peak, I have my reasons. You just need to bring me to see it. Cold words were extremely domineering. Gu Ling Wuchi looked like he was in a difficult position. He finally turned to look at Nye Tian. Chapter 44-55. Seeing that Devil's Knight insisted on going to the 6 Suns Peak, Gu Ling Wuji could not help but look at Nye Tian to ask for his opinion. What's the difference between the 6 Suns Peak and an ordinary forbidden peak? Nie Tian noticed Gu Ling Wuji's dilemma and asked with a frown. It was obvious that Gu Ling Wuji did not want Devil's Night to choose the Six Suns Peak as the venue for the Sky Beacon selection. Looking at Gu Ling Wuji's expression, it seemed that there was something special about the Six Suns Peak. Lord Beacon Emperor, you might not know this, but the Six Suns Peak is not an ordinary forbidden peak. It's a forbidden peak of fate spirit. Gu Ling Wuji looked troubled. As he spoke, he glanced at Devil's Night, as if he was observing the latter's reaction. Forbidden peak of fate spirit? Nie Tian was confused as he did not know what that meant. The 36 forbidden peaks of the Fengtian sect are all crucial places for the survival of the sect. Among the 36 forbidden peaks, there are 3 that are forbidden within the forbidden peak. Once they are damaged, it will directly affect the stability of the entire Sky Beacon mountain range. That's why they're called the Forbidden Peaks of Fate Spirit. Gu Ling Wuji explained and looked at Devil's Night again. Does the Beacon's Emperor have an ulterior motive for choosing the Six Suns Forbidden Peak as the venue for the Sky Beacon selection? Ulterior motive? Devil's Night sneered with a look of disdain. Do you think that I'll harm the Fengtian sect Master Gu Ling? Gu Ling Wuji sneered. Why not? Gu Ling Wuji sneered. At that time, the Sky Beacon sect occupied the Sky Beacon mountain range. As the Beacon's Emperor, Devil's Night must be very resentful towards it. Hence, it was normal for him to want to destroy it. Nie Tian immediately understood Gu Ling Wuji's worries. His heart sank as he did not think of this. Devil's Night was a vicious and temperamental person. What if he did not want to unify the Fengtian sect, but to destroy the Fengtian sect? The Beacon's Emperor wanted to destroy the Fengtian sect. It might sound incomprehensible, but for Devil's Night, nothing was impossible. Nie Tian, don't worry. If I wanted to destroy the Fengtian sect, I wouldn't have helped you before, Devil's Night said with a faint smile as he saw that Nie Tian's expression wasn't right. Nie Tian frowned and said, Isn't it too risky to hold the Fengtian selection on the Xixiang Peak? The 7th cultivator of true virtue's sacred world would become one of the most important sacred worlds in the heavens in the future, and many great forces had been eyeing it for a long time. The Sky Beacon selection was a fuse that attracted many major powers. There was even a possibility of alerting some forces that had been hiding for a long time. Under such circumstances, the Xixiang Peak is the best choice. Devil's Night's eyes flickered as he spoke with a cold expression. Nie Heaven's eye light trembled. Hearing Devil's Night's words, he seemed to know about the collapse of the heavens. You know about it too? Gu Ling Wuji was surprised and asked. Isn't it just the collapse of the heavens? The corner of Devil's Night's mouth curled into a sneer and his eyes were filled with disdain. Seems the world-ending calamity in the eyes of others was nothing in his eyes. Gu Ling Wuji was stunned and only reacted after a long time. He didn't expect that Devil's Night also knew about the collapse of the heavens. He also didn't expect that Devil's Night didn't care about the collapse of the heavens at all. But on second thought, the elders of the Soul sect were mostly array masters, alchemists, and boundary masters. It wasn't strange for them to know about the collapse of the heavens. Or perhaps someone in the Soul sect had participated in the deduction of the collapse of the heavens. Senior Gu Ling, let's go to the Xixiang Peak first. After thinking for a long time, Nie Tian still decided to go to the Xixiang Peak. Gu Ling Wuji had a helpless expression, but he still nodded and led the way. This is Xixiang Peak. After a while, Nie Tian and the others arrived above a mountain peak. Gu Ling Wuji pointed down and said. Nie Tian looked down and didn't see anything special about the Xixiang Peak. On the contrary, the mountain was much flatter than the other peaks, but the area was much larger. Nie Tian, look carefully. Suddenly, the fat cat's voice sounded and reminded Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but sink. He opened his devil's eye and was instantly stunned. He saw that there was a very strange layer of clouds floating at the peak of the Xixiang Peak. It was faintly dark red, and the space seemed to be in a misty state. Lord Beacon Emperor, the Six-Yang Peak is covered by 6 layers of fire-sun clouds. Gu Ling Wuji walked to Nie Tian's side and transmitted his voice. The temperature of these fire-sun clouds is extremely high. The surface is close to 1,000 degrees, and the center of the fire-sun clouds has a temperature of more than 10 million degrees. More than 10 million degrees. Nie Tian couldn't help but change his expression and was extremely shocked. If such a high temperature was close to the core of some stars, even an ordinary sky martial divine ancestor expert might not be able to withstand it. Nie Tian didn't expect that this seemingly unremarkable fire-sun cloud would have such a high temperature. The entire Six-Yang Peak is covered by the fire-yang cloud. How can we enter it? Nie Tian took a deep breath and asked in confusion. There are 6 underground tunnels under the Six-Yang Peak. You can enter them. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and continued. However, 5 of these 6 passages have been blocked, and only one is passable. 1. Nie Tian frowned and asked, how big is this passage? It's very narrow. At most, only 2 people can pass through it side by side, Gu Ling Wuji said truthfully. Nie Heaven's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but look at Devil's Night. There would definitely be many people participating in the Heaven selection. Including the spectators, there would definitely be tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands. How long would it take for 10,000 people to walk through a narrow passageway that only allowed 2 people to walk side by side? Don't worry, I have a way to temporarily expand the passageway. Devil's Knight smiled faintly, as if he had already decided on the Six-Yang Peak. Let's go in and take a look. Nie Tian thought for a while and finally decided to enter the Six-Yang Peak to take a look. Everyone as they landed, Gu Ling Wuji walked at the front. Soon, they arrived at the underground passageway of the Six-Yang Peak. Outside the passageway, 2 gray-robed elders sat quietly with their eyes closed. There was no aura around them, as if they had passed away. Elders, I'm sorry to disturb you. Gu Ling Wuji bowed slightly to the 2 elders, but the 2 elders did not respond at all. Gu Ling Wuji didn't say much and directly walked in. Nie Tian and the rest followed closely. After entering the passageway, Nie Tian instantly felt a scorching aura rush towards him, as if he was in a furnace. This is 100 meters underground. It's tens of thousands of meters away from the fire-yang cloud above. However, due to the influence of the fire-yang cloud, the entire passageway is extremely hot. Gu Ling Wuji explained as he walked forward. Nie Heaven's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect the fire-yang cloud to have such a huge influence. The Six-Yang Peak is known as the Forbidden Life Spirit Peak because of the existence of the fire-yang cloud. Gu Ling Wuji continued, if the fire-yang cloud above the Six-Yang Peak disperses, the entire Heaven Beacon mountain range will turn into a sea of fire. Nie Tian and the rest listened quietly and didn't say anything. After a while, everyone walked to the end of the passageway. A strange crimson door appeared in front of them. It seemed to be condensed from liquid flames and was extremely strange. Chapter 44-56. Everyone stared at the liquid flame door in front of them with peculiar expressions. Liquid flames were extremely rare. At first glance, the flame door in front of them looked like underground magma, but upon closer inspection, they would discover that it was formed by a kind of strange flame that flowed continuously. Nieskai noticed that the surface of the flaming door was covered in a layer of runes. Clearly, it was used to imprison flames. Namely, even so, everyone could still clearly feel the intense and scorching aura of the flaming door. This is the entrance to the Six Suns Peak. The flames in the flaming door come from the fiery sun cloud. Gu Ling Wuji explained. Then, he walked forward and used a special hand seal to open the flaming door. Done at the same time, a blazing flame aura assaulted his face. The burning aura was extremely strong. Fortunately, none of the people present were weak. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to withstand the burning qi. Gu Ling Wu Qi was in front, and the others followed closely behind, stepping into the door of flames. After crossing the flame door, they arrived at the Real Sixyang Peak. Unlike the other mountain gates, the Sixyang Peak was located at the bottom of the Sixyang Peak. It was like a huge underground palace with pavilions, terraces, and other buildings. Nie Tian looked around and immediately discovered 6 huge stone pillars. They were extremely tall and their tops could not be seen. They seemed to be connected to the Sixyang Peak above. This is the 6th solar fire pillar. The top is connected to the 6th solar peak, and above it is the 6th solar sacrificial altar. Gu Ling Wuji knew that Nie Tian was curious, so he explained. Sixyang altar. Devil's Knight's gaze became slightly hot, as if he was very interested in the 6th solar altar. His figure moved, and he directly climbed up one of the 6 solar flame pillars. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he followed Devil's Knight. Qingqi and Gu Ling Wuji exchanged glances with each other and immediately followed. In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them arrived at the top of the 6th solar fire pillar and directly ascended the 6th solar altar. Nie Tian steadied himself and looked around. He saw 6 sun sacrificial altars arranged in a ring shape. They were connected to each other, forming a huge 6 sun ring. The 6th solar sacrificial altar was enormous. It had a circumference of 100,000 meters. It was surrounded by dragon-shaped flaming pillars. In the middle of it was a huge flaming tower. Blazing flames were constantly spurting out like flaming dragons. The surrounding temperature was hundreds of degrees Celsius. Even though Nie Tian and the others were powerful, they were still sweating profusely. These 6 altars are perfect for the sky beacon selection. Devil's Knight smiled in satisfaction. Using the Sixyang sacrificial altar as an arena, are you crazy? Gu Ling Wuji's expression changed as he roared. The Yang altar was the core of the 6 sun's peak. The fire tower in the center of the altar extended upwards, directly connecting to the fiery sun cloud in the sky. If the 6th solar altar was in danger, the entire 6th solar peak would be implicated. If the situation got worse and the fiery sun cloud was accidentally triggered, wouldn't the entire Fengtian sect turn into a sea of fire? Devil's Knight used the 6th solar sacrificial altar as an arena. Wasn't he a lunatic? This altar looks grand, but without the protection of a formation, it is not stable. Battles between warriors are often difficult to control. Sometimes the impact is too great for the altar to bear. Nie Tian frowned and said in a deep voice, "The 6th solar sacrificial altar is indeed unstable, but we have Grandmaster Qingqi. Do we need to worry about not being able to set up a protective formation?" Devil's Knight smiled and looked at Qingqi. Qingqing's expression changed as he said in surprise, "You want me to set up a protective formation for the 6th solar sacrificial altar? Can't I?" Devil's Knight's mouth twitched as he asked. Qingqing's expression darkened as he looked at Nie Tian. "Senior Qingqi, if you set up the protective formation, how confident are you that the 6th solar sacrificial altar will not be destroyed?" Nie Tian thought for a while and asked. "There is only half a month left until the sky beacon selection begins. The protective formation set up within half a month will not be too strong and cannot guarantee the stability of the 6th solar sacrificial altar." Qingqi looked at the 6th solar sacrificial altar and said, "But as long as the 6th solar sacrificial altar is not attacked by experts at the peak of the sky martial realm, it should be fine." Nie Tian slightly nodded as he calculated in his heart. Although the sky beacon selection was aimed at young warriors, there would definitely be experts at the peak of the sky martial realm among the spectators. If he could not guarantee that these people would not attack, he would not be able to guarantee the safety of the 6th solar sacrificial altar. My Soul Divine sect also has many formation masters. If they cooperate with Grandmaster Qingqi, they will definitely be able to set up a stronger protective formation. Devil's Knight did not wait for Nie Tian to speak. "Why must you hold the sky beacon selection at the 6th solar peak?" Nie Tian looked at Devil's Knight and asked in a deep voice. I have already said that the Feng Tian sect will encounter unpredictable enemies. The sixth solar peak is our best choice. Devil's Knight looked calm and sincere. Is that really the case? Nie Tian frowned as he was doubtful. He faintly felt that there must be another reason why Devil's Knight chose the sixth solar peak as the venue for the sky beacon selection. Nie Tian, we have the same goal. We both want the Feng Tian sect to rise again. I will not do anything detrimental to the Feng Tian sect. Devil's Knight knew that Nie Tian was doubting him. Then we will first build a protective formation at the sixth solar sacrificial altar. If the protective formation of the sixth solar sacrificial altar is not completed by the time the sky beacon selection begins, or it is not strong enough to guarantee the safety of the altar, then we will change the venue to the Divine Gate Peak. Nie Tian thought for a while and proposed a compromise. Devil's Knight did not hesitate to agree. His eyes flashed with a hint of slyness. Devil's Knight, when will the formation masters of the Soul Divine sect arrive? Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and asked directly. In a few days, they will bring the materials needed to build the protective formation. Devil's Knight smiled again and seemed very proud. It was obvious that he had already thought of everything and had already asked the formation masters of the Soul Divine sect to prepare the materials in advance. Then let's go first. Nie Tian nodded and looked at the fiery sun clouds above again. He felt that it was somewhat unsafe. Pieces after a while, the four of them walked out of the sixth solar peak. Along the way, they briefly discussed the matters related to the sky beacon selection. The sixth solar peak was only used as the venue for the final martial arts competition. As for the early stage, it was another choice. Not the venue for the early stage was not important. All the forces would choose to wait and see in the early stage and only intervene in the later stage. Therefore, Nie Tian let Gu Ling Wuqi decide the venue for the early stage. Senior Gu Ling, what forces are there in the seventh cultivator of true virtue? Nie Tian asked about the distribution of forces in the seventh cultivator of true virtue. Although the seventh cultivator of true virtue is a primary sacred world, due to its special location, the forces in the sacred world are very complicated. Moreover, their strength is not weak. Gu Ling Wuqi took a deep breath and said, among the many forces, there are only 5 or 6 sects that are worth paying attention to. Gu Ling Wuqi slightly nodded and waited for Gu Ling Wuqi to continue. Devil's Knight had a smile on his face and seemed to be very interested. There are a total of 9 top forces in the seventh cultivator of true virtue. They are collectively known as the 1 religion, 2 sects, 3 families, and 4 schools. Gu Ling Wuqi's eyes shone brightly as he began to introduce them. Chapter 44-57. After hearing Gu Ling Wuqi's words, Nie Tian's eyes lit up with interest. 1 religion, 2 sects, 3 families, and 4 factions. Qing Wuqi and Devil's Knight were also looking forward to it. The so-called 1 religion, 2 sects, 3 families, and 4 factions refers to the 9 strongest forces in the sacred world of 7th cultivators. Gu Ling Wuqi's eyes seemed to be deep in thought as he said, the 1 religion, 2 sects are the Holy Sage sect, Heavenly Beacon sect, and Gia sect. The 3 families and 4 factions are the 1 family, Wind Demon's clan, Han family, Soaring Mountain sect, Equaling Mountain sect, Scarlet Lake sect, and Northern Desert's 3 Blades. Is the Holy Sage sect stronger than the Gia sect? Nie Tian was puzzled. Although Gu Ling Wuqi didn't say it clearly, he could faintly hear that there was a gap in strength between the 9 forces. The 1 religion and 2 sects seemed to be stronger than the 3 families and 4 factions. Under normal circumstances, the first faction to be talked about was usually the strongest. Thus, from what he heard, the Holy Sage sect seemed to be the strongest force in the sacred world of 7th cultivators. However, Nie Tian saw that the Gia sect was the strongest force and had the potential to unify the sacred world of 7th cultivators. Demon Knight also had the same question. He stared at Guling Wuchi with burning eyes and waited for him to continue. Guling Wuchi nodded slightly and said, "A long time ago, the Heavenly Beacon sect was the strongest force in the sacred world of seventh cultivators and ruled the entire sacred world. But later, the Heavenly Beacon sect declined and the Holy Sage sect rose. In a few thousand years, they subdued and annexed thousands of sects, and their forces spread over half of the sacred world of seventh cultivators. But what was strange was that when the Shang-Xing sect was at its peak, they suddenly chose to live in seclusion for some unknown reason. Many of their branches were disbanded, and the main altar of the sect retreated to Mount Mingxing. After that, their reputation deteriorated day by day. The rise of the Holy Sage sect and its seclusion was very short, only a few thousand years. The rise of the Gia sect came after the Shang-Xing sect. In the past, the Gia sect was just a small sect. Later on, an extremely powerful and ambitious sect leader appeared. Within a few years, the Gia sect had annexed several sects that were similar in strength to it, and its strength quickly accumulated. Over the next 1,000 years, the Gia sect either annexed, gathered, or allied with other sects, and rapidly grew. Until now, it has become the strongest sect in the sacred world of seventh cultivators. At this point, Guling Wuchi paused for a moment before continuing. Among the one religion and two sects, although the Shang Saint sect has been in seclusion, its foundation is still there. It has always been entrenched in Mingxing Mountain, and some of its experts have not left. Therefore, its true strength should not be below the Gia sect. The Heaven Beacon sect has declined too quickly in recent years. The upper echelons of the sect are on the verge of disbanding. Fortunately, Sect Master Lung found the Beacon Emperor, allowing the sect to be revived. Guling Wuchi looked at Devil's Knight and coughed dryly. The Heaven Beacon selection is just around the corner, and the Soul sect has appeared again. It seems that the time has come for the Feng Tian sect to unify. Devil's Knight couldn't help but smile. Of course, he knew what Guling Wuchi was thinking. He said, "When the Heaven Beacon Soul sect separated from the Feng Tian sect, it left the Heaven Beacon mountain range with many secrets. I heard that sect leader Guling has visited the Soul sect before, so you should know the strength of the Soul sect better than others." The unification of the Feng Tian sect was a good thing, but the problem was that, after the unification, would the Fate sect or the Soul sect be in charge? There's no need to remind the Beacon's Emperor. I am not only a dual cultivator, so I naturally understand the significance of the Soul sect to the Feng Tian sect. Guling Wuchi sneered. Although the Feng Tian sect has declined, its foundation is still there. It's no exaggeration to say that even today, the Heaven Beacon mountain range is still one of the most powerful places in the All Heavens sacred world. If the Feng Tian sect can make good use of the Heaven Beacon Grand Array, no one in the All Heavens sacred world will be able to take down the Heaven Beacon mountain range. Sect Master Guling is right. It's just that the Celestial Beacon Array is abnormally complex. Even the first Celestial Beacon Emperor, the upper echelon of the sect, and the Array Masters may not have been able to completely control the Celestial Beacon Array. Devil's Knight smiled again and said with slight ridicule, "Today, no one can activate the Heaven Beacon Grand Array. Although your Fate sect occupies the Heaven Beacon mountain range, you can't use the Heaven Beacon Grand Array, and you can't even activate the stone statues at the various peaks. As for the special settings of the peaks, such as the barriers, killing formations, illusion formations, and so on, you know nothing about them. Therefore, even if your Fate sect stays in the Heaven Beacon mountain range, you're only a gatekeeper, completely unaware of what you're guarding." At the end of his speech, Mo Ye's face was already cold, and his eyes were gloomy. "Beacon's Emperor, what do you mean by that?" Guling Wuchi's face sank as he suppressed his anger. "Nothing, I'm just reminding your Fate sect that if you want to succeed in the Heaven Beacon selection, you must cooperate closely with your Soul sect." Devil's Knight smiled faintly and his expression turned calm. Guling Wuchi's gaze turned gloomy. How could he not understand Devil's Knight's meaning? That the Fate sect must rely on the Soul sect to deal with the upcoming crisis. Yes. Although he was angry, it was the truth. The Soul sect's members originally cultivated their soul lattices, and most of them were powerful array masters, so they knew many secrets of the sect. When the Soul sect left, they took these secrets with them. So, no one in the Fate sect knew how to activate the Heaven Beacon Stone statue. Senior Guling continued talking about the 3 families and 4 factions. Nie Tian frowned and looked at Guling Wuchi. Guling Wuchi knew that there was no point in arguing, so he nodded and continued. Although the 9 powers are called the same, the 3 families and 4 factions are much weaker than the 1 church and 2 factions. The 3 families are the 1 family, the Wind Demon's clan, and the Han family. The 3 families are often allied with the 1 church and 2 factions. For example, the 1 family was allied with the Heaven Beacon sect. After the Wind Demon's clan was born, they became very close to the Gia sect. On the other hand, the Han family doesn't rely on other powers, so their disciples rarely join other sections. Tian nodded slightly. The Wen family and the Wind Demon's clan were now allies of the Fengtian sect. As for the neutral Han family, they shouldn't be a threat to the Fengtian sect. What about the 4 factions? Nie Tian glanced at Guling Wuchi and asked. The 4 factions are the Lingshan faction, the Qishan faction, the Scarlet Lake faction, and the 3 Blades of the Northern Desert. Guling Wuchi nodded slightly and said, the 4 factions are the local powers of the sacred world of 7 cultivators. They have existed for a long time, and although they have experienced many ups and downs, they are still standing. In recent years, due to the rise of the Gia sect, the position of the 4 factions has been getting weaker and weaker. Thus, not long ago, the leaders of the 4 factions held a meeting and reached a consensus to form the 4 factions alliance. I heard that the leader of the 4 factions alliance takes turns to be the leader of the 4 factions, and each rotation lasts 1,000 years. Right now, the leader of the 4 factions alliance is Hidekian, the head of the 3 Blades of the Northern Desert. Nie Tian pondered for a moment and asked, how is the overall strength of the 4 factions alliance? Is it possible to rope them in? The 4 factions alliance sounded pretty good. If he could rope them in, they would be a great help to the Fengtian sect. Chapter 44-58. When Guling Wuji heard that Nie Tian wanted to win over the 4 sects alliance, his face sank and he fell into silence. Nie Tian saw that Guling Wuji's expression was strange and couldn't help but ask, Senior Guling, what's wrong? Guling Wuji took a deep breath and helplessly said, the 4 sects are local forces of the 7th cultivator of true cultivators. They have been in the 7th cultivator of true cultivators for a longer time than the Fengtian sect. A long time ago, when the Fengtian sect had just risen and expanded, the 4 sects naturally became their first target. It is said that the 4 sects swore to not submit to the Fengtian sect and resisted, but in the end, the higher-ups of the 4 sects were slaughtered by the Fengtian sect. The 4 sects were forced to hole up and became small local forces. Later, the Fengtian sect declined and the 4 sects rose again. Relying on their local advantages, they gradually became first-rate forces in the 7th cultivator of true cultivators. After that, the 4 sects were attacked by other forces, but they always managed to preserve their roots and survive until now. Therefore, the 4 sects have always been hostile to other forces and have no dealings with the major sections. With that, Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and sighed. It is basically impossible for Sir Beacon Emperor to win over the 4 sects alliance. So that's how it is. Nie Tian helplessly let out a sigh and shook his head with a bitter smile. He didn't expect that the history of the 4 sects would be so tortuous and filled with a strong sense of shame. Yet the organization that the 4 sects alliance hated the most was the Fengtian sect. After all, it was the Fengtian sect that caused the decline of the 4 sects for the first time. Noni Tian was very curious. How did the 4 sects alliance survive until now? Why was it able to revive every time and survive until now? Next, the four of them discussed for a while and decided to hold a high-level meeting 3 days later to jointly decide on the specific matters of the sky beacon selection. Nye Tian was about to leave when he heard Devil's Knight suddenly say, "Nye Tian, you recently broke through to the Heaven Despair realm and encountered a bottleneck, right? How did you know?" Nye Tian frowned, not concealing his surprise. Other than himself, he had only told Qing Qi and Gu Ling Wuqi about his breakthrough. How did Devil's Knight know about it? "Just like you, I've also encountered the second barrier." Devil's Knight nodded solemnly. It turned out that not long ago, Devil's Knight also tried to break through to the Heavenly Insight realm, but he encountered the same situation as Nye Tian. Although he broke through the Heavenly Insight barrier, he was blocked by the second barrier. You also have the qualifications to be a ruler. As soon as Devil's Knight's words fell, Qing Qi's expression changed, and he couldn't help but cry out, "Ruler's aptitude?" Nye Tian and Devil's Knight's expressions changed at the same time, and they both looked at Qing Qi, not understanding what the latter meant. Previously, Qing Qi had mentioned that he had heard about the other barrier from Hayakuten, but when Nye Tian asked, he didn't explain. Now that he suddenly said the words ruler's aptitude, how could Nye Tian not be surprised? Qing Qi's pupils shrunk, and he felt that he had said something wrong. He frowned, but he didn't explain anything. Nye Heaven knew that it was useless to ask again, so he pondered whether the second barrier had something to do with the star origin stone. Hayakuten, Nye Tian, and Devil's Knight, the three people who had sensed the second barrier, were closely related to the star origin stone. But strangely, it seemed that Dongwang Zhengrong did not have the second barrier. It was also possible that Dongwang Zhengrong also had the second barrier, but he didn't tell anyone about it. "Nye Tian, why don't you and I work together and try to break through together?" After a while, Devil's Knight spoke with a faint smile. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at Mo Yi, his eyes filled with deep distrust. "To tell you the truth, I've tried many times already, but I couldn't break through the second barrier. Instead, I was injured by the barrier, and even my Yuan meridians and soul line were damaged." Devil's Knight could tell that Nye Tian didn't trust him, so he spoke honestly. Nye Tian's eyes shook. He knew that Devil's Knight was telling the truth. When he tried to break through, he encountered the same situation, and even fainted for a long time. It seemed that Devil's Knight urgently needed to break through to the Heavenly Insight realm, or else he wouldn't have tried so many times without knowing the truth. Thinking about this, Nye Tian couldn't help but smile, and he had a plan in his mind. "Are you thinking of using this to threaten me and force me to save Tang 13? Before Nye Tian could say anything, Mo Yi seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. With a laugh, he said, "Joining hands to make breakthroughs is beneficial to both of us. If you use this as a threat, you will lose the equality between us." "Yes, but what if I don't agree?" Nye Tian's lips twitched and he faintly smiled. Alliance working together to break through was beneficial to both parties, but Nye Tian's advantage was that he wasn't in a hurry. Demon, as if expecting Nye Tian to say this, Devil's Knight's lips twitched. "I can give Tang 13 a chance and help him suppress the soul seed in his body. Whether or not he can defeat the soul seed will depend on his own luck." "What do you mean?" Nye Tian's eyes heated, interested. "I've seen it. Though the soul seed is strong, it is not complete, so it can only exist for a limited amount of time. When the time is up, the soul seed will disappear." Devil's Knight's eyes darkened. "Based on my observation, the soul seed can only exist for half a month to 1 month. I will use my own soul force to help Tang 13 suppress the soul seed. As long as Tang 13 can hold on for a month, the soul seed will disappear and he will be saved. As for how long Tang 13 can hold on, it will depend on the growth of the soul seed, as well as his own soul and willpower. I cannot guarantee that Tang 13 will be saved, but to him, this is a chance." Nie Tian understood Devil's Knight's meaning and fell into deep thought. Yes. Just like Devil's Knight said, the soul of Huang Quan inside Tang 13 is only one of the 3 souls of Huang Quan. It is not complete and cannot exist for a long time. Such as if this soul of Huang Quan cannot take over Tang 13, there are still 2 other souls of Huang Quan. If Mori Shire took over another vessel of Huang Quan, the 3 souls of Huang Quan will automatically return and Tang 13 will be saved. Of the Ice Phoenix Ji Shui said the curse of 3 lives can suppress the soul of Huang Quan for a month. But regretfully, the curse of 3 lives couldn't even suppress the soul of Huang Quan for half a month. This maybe it was because Mori Shire saw Tang 13 as his main target to take over. But if Tang 13 can hold on for too long, Mori Shire will not take the risk and will take over the other 2 vessels of Huang Quan. Okay, deal. Understanding this, Nie Tian nodded heavily and agreed to Devil's Knight's suggestion. Demon with Knight's soul force suppression and the help of the soul lattice from the heaven beaconing statue, Tang 13 should be able to hold on for a month. Take me to Tang 13. Devil's Knight did not waste any time and said directly. Nie Tian nodded and signaled Gu Lingwuji to lead the way. But at this moment, Nie Tian and the others' expressions changed and they looked up into the sky. Whoosh! High up in the sky, accompanied by the deep hum of a saber, a 10,000-meter-long shadow of a saber appeared. With the power to destroy heaven and earth, it slashed down towards one of the peaks of the heaven-beaconing mountain range. Chapter 4459. High up in the sky above Fengtian mountain range. One slash was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Boom! The majestic aura shook heaven and earth. Astral winds howled and thunder howled. The eyes of Nie Tian and the others trembled violently. They could feel the terrifying power of this slash. It seemed to have the power to destroy the world. The power of such a slash far exceeded that of a peak sky martial divine ancestor. If it were to fall, Fengtian mountain range would probably be cut in half. Nie Tian's heart sank. He then looked at Gu Lingwuji. The latter had already moved. He soared into the sky and released his aura. He raised his palm and blocked the world-destroying slash. A few at the same time, many figures soared into the sky from the other peaks of Fengtian mountain range. They were like dragons breaking out of the abyss, resisting the slash in the sky. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He did not expect the people of Fengtian Fate sect to react so quickly. They were able to resist in an instant. Devil's Knight looked at everything in front of him. He was not nervous at all. Instead, he looked relaxed as if he was watching a good show. Boom! At that moment, the shadow of the saber descended, unleashing a destructive might that forcefully crushed the resistance from below. Then, with an unstoppable force, the saber came crashing down. Nie Tian's expression changed greatly. He could not help but exclaim in his heart. The power of this slash was too shocking. Like the person who attacked had already made up his mind to destroy the Fengtian Fate sect. Nie had seen many powerful swordsmen, but it was his first time seeing such a terrifying one. Single judging from this slash alone, the strength of the person who had unleashed the blade was probably not much weaker than the Yang God Sword Emperor. However, this was only the sacred world of 7th cultivators. How could there be such a terrifying swordsman here? Could it be that the person who attacked was not a cultivator from the sacred world of 7th cultivators, but from another force? Could it be the human emperor's palace? Nie Tian's expression changed again when he thought of the human emperor's palace. Judging from the power of the slash, the person who attacked was definitely stronger than the 5 deans. Ordinary forces definitely did not have such an expert. Therefore, the person who attacked was most likely an elder of the human emperor's palace. Bang! At this moment, Gu Lingwuji's figure was pushed back by the impact of the saber aura. He fell straight down and smashed into the ground like a giant boulder, kicking up a cloud of dust. Guling, are you alright? Qing Qi's figure flashed and supported Gu Lingwuji as he asked anxiously. I'm fine. Gu Ling Wuji steadied himself and stared at the overwhelming blade shadows with a grave expression. Was the Feng Tian sect going to be annihilated today? Like Gu Ling Wuji, the other dozens of figures were also crushed by the saber aura and fell to the ground. Rumble! The saber shadow fell with a loud rumble. Everywhere it passed, the steep mountain peaks were directly destroyed. The trees and rocks were instantly crushed. Even the earth veins were impacted. The earth rumbled endlessly. At this time, Devil's Knight's expression also changed, revealing a nervous expression. Rumble, bang, bang, bang. In the sky there were continuous explosions. Under the gaze of countless people, the saber shadow directly chopped off a strange mountain that was more than 100,000 meters tall. The mountain rocks fell and caused a wave of dust that was dozens of meters high on the ground. That's the Nine Links Peak. Gu Ling Wuji's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed. Clench. Then, more than a dozen mountains were destroyed and the surrounding area was chaotic. Below the saber shadow, where the powerful saber aura landed, a crack that was a few hundred meters wide appeared in the mountain range, and it was continuously expanding. The saber seemed to be forcefully tearing the earth apart. Everyone, retreat. Seeing this, Gu Ling Wuji's expression changed drastically. He screamed and retreated rapidly. Judging from the trajectory of the saber aura, if the saber were to descend a few hundred meters further, it would definitely severely damage the earth veins under Sky Beacon Mountain Range. By then, it would not only be a few peaks that were destroyed, but the entire Sky Beacon Mountain Range would collapse and even sink into the cracks in the ground. Tian frowned and looked up. The disciples of the surrounding peaks had begun to flee, and he could clearly see the bloody corpses on the ground. Feng. The heavenly selection had yet to begin, but the Sky Beacon sect had already suffered such a calamity. How could Tian not be heartbroken? Sky Shrouding Totem, activate. In his anger, Tian stomped the ground and unleashed the astral force in his body, forming a sky shrouding totem that shrouded the saber shadow. Tian. Master Beacon Emperor. Qing Qi and Gu Ling Wuji's eyes widened as they yelled at the same time. Tian was out of his mind. With his strength, how could he resist the attack? A cold smile appeared at the corner of Mo Ye's mouth as he stared at Tian. Bang! At that instant, the saber shadow suddenly sank, causing the heavens and earth to let out a cry. Following this, Tian's sky shrouding totem crumbled into pieces. Not even a few dozen sky martial sacred ancestors were able to weaken the saber shadow. How could Tian resist it with his strength? Bang! 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 However, right at this moment, a wave of explosions suddenly resounded from the ground, and then numerous enormous figures shot into the sky. They emanated numerous dazzling and resplendent talisman markings, and then they linked together to form a net of talisman markings. Gu Ling Wuji and the others were stunned by the scene before them. When they took a closer look, they realized that the figures were the Sky Beacon's stone statues. The Sky Beacon's stone statues activated themselves? Gu Ling Wuji was dumbfounded. He had no idea what was going on. Devil's Knight smirked. He was not too surprised, as if everything was within his expectations. Tian saw the Sky Beacon's stone statues activate and immediately retreated. Buzz. In the sky, the saber shadow let out a loud hum, but its power was blocked by the net of talismans and could not sink any further. Titan. In the next second, a shocking scene took place. Fu! The net of talismans suddenly tightened, causing cracks to appear on the saber shadow, as if it was about to shatter. Such power! Gu Ling Wuji was shocked. He did not expect a few dozen Sky Beacon stone statues to possess such power. The Feng Tian sect had 720 gates, and each gate had hundreds of stone statues. If all of these stone statues were activated, the power would be unimaginable. Boom! At that moment, the net of talismans tightened again. Then, there was an explosion in the sky, and the enormous saber shadow collapsed, turning into waves of saber intent that spread in all directions. The crowd, everyone was dumbfounded, unable to react for a long time. Sway. The net of talismans dispersed and turned into talismans that were absorbed by the sky beacon's stone statues. Boom! Then, the sky beacon's stone statues fell back to their original positions, as if they had never moved. After a few days, the waves in the sky slowly dissipated, and 3 figures in black appeared before everyone's eyes. 3. This figure was extremely burly, surrounded by saber intent. His domineering posture shocked the heavens and earth. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect 3 people to appear. Could it be that the saber shadow was created by the 3 of them? Northern Desert 3 Sabers. Gu Ling Wuji looked at the 3 black-clothed saber-wielders with a serious look and called out their names word by word. Chapter 4460. The 3 black-clothed sabermen in the air were none other than the 3 heads of the Northern Desert 3 Sabers, one of the 4 major sections. North the 3 Blades of the Desert was not only the name of a sect, but also the collective name of the sect's 3 top bladesmen. North the 3 Blades of the Desert was a force formed entirely by saber users. The leaders of the sect were 3 top-notch saber users, and the people in the sect called them the Saberhead. The 3 saber users in the sky above Feng Tian mountain range were the 3 saber leaders of the Northern Desert 3 Sabers. Ancient Ling Wuqi's eyes darkened. He did not expect the 3 Blades of the Northern Desert to suddenly attack the Feng Tian Fate sect. Although the sect and the Feng Tian sect had a deep grudge against each other, that was a long time ago. There was no need for them to seek revenge now. The 4 sects had formed an alliance not long ago, but it was only to protect themselves, so they did not do anything out of line. No one could understand why 3 Blades Mo would suddenly attack Feng Tian Fate sect. Heaven looked at the 3 saber leaders with a gloomy gaze, deep in thought. The 3 saber leaders had sharp saber intents and vigorous saber move. As they stood in the air, they were like 3 mountains. Clearly, they were all extremely strong saber users. But however, the 3 of them had not reached the level of a peak bladesman. Nie Tian was very puzzled. With the strength of the 3 of them, it was impossible for them to burst out with such a terrifying saber attack. Even if the 3 of them joined forces, they shouldn't be so powerful. Is there anyone else in the Feng Tian Fate sect who can still breathe? At this time, one of them spoke with a thunderous voice. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. The person who spoke had the weakest aura among the 3. He should be the one with the lowest status. So you are the 3 heads of the 3 sabers of the Northern Desert. I am the sect leader of the Feng Tianming sect, Gu Ling Wuji. Without waiting for Nie Tian to speak, Gu Ling Wuji's figure had already soared into the sky. His deep voice resounded through the heavens and earth. Although he was being polite, his tone was clearly filled with anger and restraint. The Feng Tian Fate sect has 1 emperor and 2 sections. As the sect master, you can't take charge. Let your beacon emperor come out and speak. Dugu Lai coldly glanced at Gu Ling Wuji and said with disdain. He was the leader of the 3 Blades of the Northern Desert. He was the weakest among the 3, but he had the worst temper. Impudent! Gu Ling Wuji's eyes darkened and he was enraged. He let out a roar and his aura was unleashed like a giant wave, crushing toward Dugu Lai. Dugu Lai's lips curled into a cold smile. He took a step forward and his saber intent surged out, shattering the pressure of the aura in front of him. He then sneered. A mere patriarch wants to suppress others with his aura? What a joke! Gu Ling Wuji's face darkened. He wanted to speak again, but he sensed a familiar aura behind him, causing him to involuntarily take half a step back. Gu Ling, a silhouette, descended from the sky. It was none other than the other leader of the Feng Tianming sect, Ling Shuang Wuchen. A few at the same time, the other higher-ups of the Feng Tian Fate sect appeared, including Fan Zhong, Shen Yunhe, and several other protectors. Ancient Ling Wuqi retreated behind Ling Shuang Wuchen and stopped talking. In recent years, Leng Shuang Wuchen had been in charge of the Feng Tian Fate sect, so it was only right for him to speak. Moreover, Gu Ling Wuji was good at array formations and enchantments, and was not good at fighting. Is this the power of the Feng Tian Fate sect? Dugalai's gaze swept across Ling Shuang Wuchen and the others as he sneered, "You guys have really declined. Brother He, my Feng Tian Ming sect has always been at peace with your four sects alliance. Why are you invading my sect today?" Ling Shuang Wuchen ignored Dugalai and fixed his eyes on Hidekian, the great saber chief of the desert north. He was still in closed-door cultivation just now, but he came out early when he was alarmed by the changes in the sect. He didn't expect the three blades of the northern desert who had come to attack the Feng Tian Fate sect. The three blades of the northern desert and the other three sects all had a deep grudge against the Feng Tian sect from long ago. However, this was all in the distant past. In the recent tens of thousands of years, the school and the four sects had a pretty good relationship. At the very least, they weren't enemies. Occasionally, the four schools would send disciples to the Feng Tian Ming sect to cultivate. Cold Shuang Wuchen had traveled around the sacred world of 7 cultivators in his early years and had come into contact with the people of the four sects, especially the people of the northern desert Three Blades. He had even cooperated with the leader of the Great Blade, Hidekian, and could be considered as a friend. Therefore, Ling Shuang Wuchen stepped forward and questioned Hidekian directly. "You?" Dugulai was about to get angry after being ignored, but Hidekian raised his hand to stop him. "Sect Master Ling, I should be the one asking you this, right?" Hidekian took a step forward, the saber intent around him raging, causing the surrounding void to tremble. His gaze was cold and murderous, as if he was suppressing his raging rage. "Brother He, what do you mean?" Ling Shuang Wuchen frowned and asked in surprise. "Now that things have come to this, are you still going to play dumb?" Hidekian sneered as the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He said in a deep voice, "Your Feng Tian Fate sect is still a great sect, why are you doing such despicable things?" Ling Shuang Wuchen's eyes darkened. He immediately felt that things were not as simple as they seemed. He said in a deep voice, "Blade Chief He, although you and I are not considered close friends, we are still somewhat fickle. I don't understand what you're saying. Please explain yourself." "Is this clear enough?" Hidekian frowned and waved his hand. A bunch of tokens flew out at an incredible speed towards Ling Shuang Wuchen with extreme sharpness. Ling Shuang Wuchen was not afraid at all. He grabbed the token in the air and exclaimed, "The Feng Wood Token." The Feng Wood Token was unique to the Feng Tian Fate sect. It was made of special wood and special runes. It was used by the sect leader to issue orders to his subordinate, Feng. Once the Feng Wood Token was issued, the disciples would carry out their task. Once the tasks were completed, they would have to return the token to the sect. Therefore, outsiders could not have the Feng Wood Token. Strange. The strange thing was, why did Hidekian have the Feng Wood Token? "This is the Feng Tian Fate sect's token. Why is it in your hands?" Ling Shuang Wuchen calmed down and asked in a deep voice. "That's what I want to ask you." Hidekian let out a thunderous roar. The saber intent around him seemed like it was about to boil. He said furiously, "My four-sect alliance does not want to fight with anyone for power. Even if we form an alliance, it is only to protect ourselves. But your Feng Tian Fate sect is so aggressive. You even sent your disciples to kill the people of the four sects alliance. They are like animals, killing the innocent, not even sparing the women and children. The four sects alliance has 17 cities and tens of millions of civilians. They have been massacred by them. Outside the city gates, blood flows like a river and corpses are piled up like a mountain. The stench of blood is everywhere. Ling Shuang Wuchen, tell me, should I avenge them?" Boom! In his rage, the saber intent around Hidekian's body surged like the sea, causing heaven and earth to tremble. Ling Shuang Wuchen's expression changed. He immediately reacted and asked in shock, "You found these Feng Wood tokens from the people who killed them? What do you think?" Hidekian's eyes were bloodshot. He took a step forward and his saber intent soared to the sky as if it wanted to split the world in half. Chapter 4461. Hidekian's saber intent surged like waves, causing the space around him to groan. At that moment, he was like a raging butcher's knife that wanted to kill everyone in front of him. 17 towns and tens of millions of lives were the reason for Hidekian's rage. "Blade Master we haven't found out the truth yet. Please calm down." Ling Shuang Wuchen's eyes darkened and he took a few steps back. He was not afraid of Hidekian, but he did not want to fight him. There was something fishy about this. It was highly likely that someone had planted the blame. In fact, Hidekian and the other two had attacked the Fengtian Fate sect without knowing the truth. They had destroyed more than a dozen peaks, and even killed many Fate sect disciples. This had enraged Ling Shuang Wuchen. However, he knew that he had to calm down no matter how angry he was. If he really fought with Hidekian, it would undoubtedly turn into a war between the Fengtian Fate sect and the Four-sect alliance. "Calm down my ass." However, at that moment, before Hidekian could speak, Dugulai roared. The saber intent around him floated in the air, and the broadsword in his hand slashed down. A domineering saber shadow appeared in an instant and pressed down on Ling Shuang Wuchen with a momentum that could split mountains. Ling Shuang Wuchen's eyes trembled slightly. He gently stomped his feet and a halo shield appeared around his body, blocking Dugulai's tyrannical attack. However, he was forced to retreat a few meters. "Go to hell." Then, before Ling Shuang Wuchen could stabilize himself, Dugulai attacked again. The saber aura surged into the sky like a falling galaxy. Ling Shuang Wuchen's expression changed when he sensed that this attack was not a simple one. He then moved his palm and a strange lotus appeared. He threw it into the air, and it bloomed in the air, releasing layers of colorful splendor. It was like a spring breeze that dispersed the endless saber intent. Dugulai's eyes froze and he was shocked. He had not expected Ling Shuang Wuchen to have such an amazing technique. However, in the next moment, before Dugulai could react, the strange lotus suddenly fell and turned into rune shackles that imprisoned him. "Damn it!" Dugulai roared and tried to break free, but he found that the rune shackles were getting tighter and tighter. They directly penetrated his flesh and absorbed his blood yuan force. "Blade Master please calm down," Ling Shuang Wuchen shouted before Hidekian could make a move. Hidekian originally wanted to make a move, but he hesitated for a moment and ultimately still endured it. Beside him, the second Blade Chief of the Northern Desert, Gan Xing, also stopped in time. "Blade Master I only want Third Blade Master to calm down. I won't hurt him." When Ling Shuang Wuchen saw that Hidekian did not make a move, he let out a long breath and waved his hand to release Dugulai. If Hidekian and Gan Xing had made a move, then Gu Ling Wuchi and the others behind Ling Shuang Wuchen would definitely have made a move too. At that time, it would be difficult for both sides to stop. "Old fart, I'll chop you up." Dugulai flew into a rage after breaking free. He roared and wanted to attack again, but Hidekian stopped him. "Third brother, don't be rash." Hidekian stopped Dugulai and stared at Ling Shuang Wuchen. He said loudly, "Sect leader Ling, the other higher-ups of the Four-sect alliance are also on their way to the Fengtian Fate sect. Therefore, you must give me an explanation for the massacre by the disciples of the Fengtian Fate sect." Hidekian was much calmer now, but he could not hide the murderous intent in his eyes. He did not expect Ling Shuang Wuchen to be so powerful that he could suppress Dugulai with one hand. Dugulai, although he was the weakest among the three blades of the Northern Desert, he was not an ordinary person. It seemed that although the Fengtian Fate sect had declined for a long time, its overall strength could not be underestimated. Dugulai was not weak. It was just that the three blades of the Northern Desert had used up too much of his strength. Moreover, He did not know Ling Wuchen at all, so he was caught off guard and was directly controlled by the latter. If they fought face to face, even if Ling Wuchen could win, he would have to pay the price. Blade Master the massacre is not a small matter. Aren't you being too presumptuous to conclude that it was done by the Fengtian Fate sect with just a few tokens? How could Ling Wuchen not know that Hidekian was threatening him by mentioning the four-sect alliance? But at the same time, it also meant that he would not attack anymore. If it was just a few tokens, I would not have been so impulsive. Hidekian sneered and said, I personally took the Fengtian wood tokens from the murderers. I also checked their martial bodies and found that they were all martial artists with lifelines. Moreover, the leader admitted that he was ordered by the Fengtian Fate sect's Tianyue flag master, Fan Zhong, to massacre the city. Fan Zhong. When Ling Wuchen heard this name, his expression changed, and his heart sank. Fan Zhong was one of the four flag masters of the Fengtian Fate sect, but he had always coveted the position of sect leader. During this time, Ling Wuchen had been in seclusion, so the sect's affairs were handled by the two flag masters, Fan Zhong and Xin Yunhe. Could it be that Fan Zhong acted on his own and sent people to massacre the cities ruled by the four-sect alliance? Such as if that was the case, even if Ling Wuchen didn't know about it, it was indeed the Fengtian Fate sect's doing. Sect Master Ling, why don't you let Fan Zhong explain the situation in person? Hidekian had a rough appearance, but his mind was very meticulous. He had already guessed some secrets from Ling and Wuchen's reaction. The expressions of Nie Tian and the others changed as well. Everyone from the Fengtian Fate sect turned to look at Fan Zhong. Cold while Wuchen was in seclusion, the Fengtian Fate sect had undergone a huge change. However, heaven knew that Fan Zhong had plotted with the Gia sect and made some shady deals. Ghost the Cliff sect had always had the ambition to unify the seven cultivators' sacred world. Not only did they want to deal with the Fengtian Fate sect, but they also wanted to deal with the other sects, including the four-sect alliance. Under such circumstances, it wasn't impossible for Gia sect to get Fan Zhong to send people to provoke the four-sect alliance or even massacre a city. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Fan Zhong's old face immediately changed, turning green and red. Clearly, he had a guilty conscience. This is bad. Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw Fan Zhong's reaction. Oh no. Could it be that Fan Zhong had really sent those people to massacre the city? At this time, Ling Wuchen roared and asked Fan Zhong to come out. Sect Master. Fan Zhong trembled as he stood up. His eyes flickered with uncertainty and his head was lowered. Ling Wuchen felt even more uneasy when he saw this scene. His expression turned ugly as he scolded. Speak, what exactly happened? From the looks of it, it was most likely Fan Zhong's doing. However, Ling Wuchen couldn't understand. Even if Fan Zhong coveted the position of sect master, why did he have to massacre the people of the four-sect alliance? For the Fengtian Fate sect making enemies everywhere. What benefits did it bring to him? Fan Zhong slightly raised his head. His gaze swept across Hidekian and the others as beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Flag Master Fan, you are an expert of your generation. Do you not dare to admit what you did? Hidekian's eyes were dark as he spoke in a cold tone. He was like a man-eating beast. Chapter 4462. Hidekian glared at Fan Zhong with a murderous look in his eyes. It was obvious that he was ready to attack at any time. Fan Zhong's expression was extremely ugly. He kept looking at Gu Lingwuji, but the latter's face was gloomy and he ignored him. Flag Leader Fan, are you still not going to say anything? Hidekian could no longer suppress the murderous intent in his heart when he saw that Fan Zhong did not say anything. Fan Zhong, what exactly happened? Tell me everything. Gu Lingwuji was also angry, and he shouted in a cold tone. Fan Zhong was drenched in cold sweat and his face was as pale as a sheet. He finally said, "This matter is indeed related to me." "You really did it?" Hidekian's eyes narrowed and the saber intent around him burst out like a volcano eruption. If he did not still have a trace of rationality, he would have killed Fan Zhong already. Gu Lingwuji's tensed face immediately collapsed when he heard Fan Zhong's words. The stone in his heart fell to the bottom. Although he could tell that this matter was related to Fan Zhong, he still had a sliver of hope in his heart. However, Fan Zhong's words shattered the last bit of hope in his heart. It seemed like this matter would not be resolved easily. Nie Tian stood at the side with an ugly expression. Back then, he chose to ignore Fan Zhong's previous actions for the sake of the Fengtian Fate sect. He did not expect Fan Zhong to do something so heartless. Following that, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Fan Zhong finally revealed the ins and outs of the matter. It turned out that when Fan Zhong was working with the Gia sect, he was secretly instructed by the Gia sect master to secretly train a group of assassins. These assassins came from the Gia sect, but they cultivated in the Fengtian Fate sect. They cultivated their fate and at the same time, they practiced the Fengtian Fate sect's martial technique. On the surface, they were disciples of the Fengtian Fate sect, but in reality, they were assassins from the Gia sect. About a few months ago, these assassins were recalled to the Gia sect, and there was no news of them after that. The massacre that happened in the four-sect alliance should be done by these assassins. Fan Zhong was much calmer at the end and sighed. These assassins aren't disciples of the Heaven's Beacon sect. They were personally trained by me. Therefore, none of this has anything to do with the Fengtian Fate sect. It was all my doing. I am willing to bear any consequences. After saying that, Fan Zhong seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. His eyes no longer had the sharpness from before. Fan Zhong had initially thought that he would be able to conceal the fact that he had betrayed the sect, and that only Nie Tian and the others would know about it. Who would have thought that he would have no choice but to confess his betrayal in front of everyone? This time, his reputation was completely ruined. As the last sentence fell, the scene fell into a dead silence. Gu Lingwuji's expression softened a little. Things were not as serious as he had thought. He didn't expect Fan Zhong to betray the Fengtian Fate sect and collude with external enemies just for the position of sect master. What was even more unexpected was that Nie Tian had actually settled this matter. If Nie Tian didn't appear, the Fengtian Fate sect would have changed by the time Gu Lingwuji finished his seclusion. The others from the Fengtian Fate sect also calmed down a little. Fan Zhong had admitted everything and was willing to bear the consequences. This was obviously a good thing for the Fengtian Fate sect. But the problem was, would Hidekian accept Fan Zhong's explanation? Even if what he said was true? What a great excuse! After a while, Hidekian opened his mouth. The murderous intent in his eyes didn't decrease at all. Instead, it became even more intense. He said in a deep voice, "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Even a ghost wouldn't believe such an excuse. Blade Master everything I said is true." Fan Zhong's expression changed as if he didn't expect Hidekian to have such a reaction. He had already admitted that he had betrayed the sect, so why would he lie? One had to admit that Fan Zhong was too focused on his own matters that he neglected the thoughts of Hidekian and the others. Gu Lingwuji frowned, but he wasn't too surprised. Putting himself in Hidekian's shoes, it wasn't strange for him to think that Fan Zhong was lying. First of all, the Fengtian Fate sect and the Gia sect were mortal enemies. This was something that everyone in the sacred world of seventh cultivators knew. Fan Zhong pushing the blame to the Gia sect was already suspicious. Secondly, Hidekian had the Fengwood token, the lifeline cultivator, and the words of the assassin before his death. These were all ironclad evidence, so the Fengtian Fate sect couldn't escape responsibility. Fan Zhong standing out to take on everything by himself, wasn't this the same as abandoning the rook to protect the general? Lastly, Fan Zhong was the flag master of the Fengtian Fate sect, second only to the sect master. Why would he collude with the Gia sect? Was it really just for the sect master's position? At least in Hidekian's opinion, a mere sect master's position wasn't enough for a flag master to betray the sect. With these considerations, it was impossible for Hidekian to believe Fan Zhong's words. Gu Ling Wuqi, Fan Zhong, you're a sect master and a flag master. What a good show. At this time, Dugulai couldn't hold it in any more and shouted, "You've massacred tens of millions of civilians from our 4 sections. Do you think it'll end just by letting a flag master take the blame?" Hidekian was also anxious and directly swore, 3 blade leaders, this he dares to swear on the dignity of martial arts that if there's even the slightest bit of falsehood in what I just said, I will suffer the wrath of the heavens. Swear? Dugulai sneered and said disdainfully, "You're someone who casually betrays the sect. What qualifications do you have to talk about the dignity of martial arts? You?" Fan Zhong's expression sank. He suddenly felt his qi and blood surge, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The wrath of the heavens has arrived so quickly. It seems that even the heavens can't stand it anymore. Dugulai sneered and his expression became even more arrogant and disdainful. Gu Ling Wuqi glanced at Fan Zhong and didn't know what to say. "Fan Zhong, you can leave first." At this time, a calm voice was heard and a young figure walked forward. It was Nye Tian. Fan Zhong's face was pale. He looked deeply at Nye Tian and retreated to the side. "Where did this brat come from? Do you think you have the right to speak here?" Dugulai's face darkened when he saw a young martial artist suddenly walking over. He roared angrily and his aura surged like a raging wave. Nye Tianling stood where he was and didn't move an inch. Dugulai's expression changed and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He didn't expect that this martial artist in the 9th level of the Heaven Tribulation realm would be unafraid of his aura. "Dugulai, this is the Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian sect. Don't be rude." Seeing this, Gu Ling Wuqi took a step forward and a sharp aura whistled out. It directly broke through Dugulai's aura and forced the latter to take a few steps back. "He's the Beacon Emperor?" Dugulai steadied himself and looked at Nye Tian in shock. He clearly didn't expect the Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian sect to be such a young martial artist. The Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian sect looks at Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded slightly and glanced at Dugulai before locking his gaze on Hidekian. Chapter 4463. Hidekian sized up Nye Tian and his expression changed slightly. He did not expect the Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian sect to be such a young cultivator. Dang. Before coming to the Fengtian sect, Hidekian had heard some rumors about the Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian sect. Most of them were about how the Beacon Emperor defeated the challengers from the Gia sect. Ghost. Hidekian had never seen the geniuses of the Cliff sect before, but he could roughly guess that they were all talented young cultivators. They should be at least in the heavenly enlightenment realm. Difficult. Could it be that those geniuses were defeated by this young, silver-haired swordsman? "Sir Beacon King, since you are the master of a sect, you should give me an explanation." After a moment, Hidekian spoke with an expressionless face. Although he was threatening, but everyone could feel that Hidekian was not as aggressive as before when facing Nye Tian. He seemed to be much calmer. "Then may I ask what explanation do you want?" Nye Tian's lips twitched as he smiled evilly. "Your Fengtian sect massacred 17 cities of the 4-sect alliance and tens of millions of lives. What kind of explanation do you think I want?" Hidekian's face darkened. He did not expect Nye Tian to have such an attitude. Gu Ling Wuqi, Ling Shuang Wuchen, and the rest's expressions changed. They felt that Nye Tian's attitude was inappropriate. Even though the massacre of the 4-sect alliance was not done by the Fengtian sect, it had a lot to do with the Fengtian sect. Hidekian and the rest were here to denounce him, but Nye Tian was acting like a rascal. Wasn't this adding fuel to the fire? Blade Leader I am very sad that your sect was massacred. But Flag Leader Fan has already explained that everything was done by him and the Gia sect. Nye Tian was very calm. Indeed, even so, the Feng Tian Fate School still has to bear a lot of responsibility for this. But the three of you ambushed our sect before figuring out what happened. Not only did you destroy a dozen of our peaks, but you also killed many of our disciples. I feel that the sect has already paid a heavy price for this. If you still want an explanation, you should go to the Gia sect, not the Feng Tian Fate sect. You. Hidekian's eyes darkened, and his face turned red with anger. He couldn't say a word. He never imagined that Nye Tian would say such a thing. Gu Ling Wuqi, Ling Shuang Wuchen, and the rest were stunned as well. Nye Tian was being domineering and shameless. Big brother, why are you still talking nonsense with them? Let's directly start the battle. Dugulai, who was by the side, had long been unable to restrain himself and directly roared. Since Nye Tian was so unreasonable, there was no need to talk anymore. Because in fact, in the eyes of others, Nye Tian was indeed being unreasonable. But if they thought about it carefully, Nye Tian's words were not unreasonable. Because the Feng Tian Fate sect was indeed responsible for this matter, but they shouldn't bear the main responsibility. The main responsibility lay with the Gia sect and Fan Zhong. As far as Nye Tian was concerned, Hidekian's reckless decision to attack the heaven-conducting sect when he didn't know the truth was very infuriating. Feng Tian the heaven selection was just around the corner, but someone destroyed more than a dozen peaks of the Feng Tian Fate sect. This was a heavy blow to the Feng Tian Fate sect's prestige, and might even affect the upcoming heaven selection. Because of this, Nye Tian was a little angry. If it wasn't for the fact that the four sects' alliance's cities were massacred, Nye Tian would have declared war against them. The reason why Hidekian's group dared to be so arrogant was not because they were sad, but also because they looked down on the Feng Tian Fate sect. In other words, if Hidekian had evidence that the Gia sect had massacred the cities, would he still bring Gan Xing and Dugulai along to denounce them? To put it bluntly, Hidekian was still bullying the Feng Tian Fate sect because they were weak. But Hidekian's group did not expect the Feng Tian Fate sect to have such a strong foundation to be able to block their combined attack. But the previous attack was so powerful that it was clearly not meant to destroy the Feng Tian Fate sect's peaks, but the entire Feng Tian mountain range. Everyone else's attention was focused on the massacre, but Nye Tian was calmer, so he thought more about it. Because of this, therefore, the fact that Nye Tian was talking to Hidekian in such a calm manner was already very benevolent of him. Sir Beacon Emperor, how can you prove that Fan Zhong isn't lying? At this moment, the second blade leader of the Northern Desert Three Blades, Gan Xing, stepped forward and stopped the impulsive Dugulai. He looked at Nye Tian and asked. Nye Tian frowned and pondered for a moment. In the end, he told them about Fan Zhong and the conditions that the Ghost Cliff sect had set for Fan Zhong. That's what happened. I have told you the truth. Whether you believe me or not is up to you. With that, Nye Tian looked at Hidekian again. He knew that the latter was the one who had the final say. Hidekian's face darkened as he stared at Nye Tian. After a long while, he finally spoke. Sir Beacon Emperor, I can believe you for now. Blade Leader, he is indeed a wise man. You know when to advance and when to retreat. Nye Tian smiled faintly and sighed in relief. In fact, he was also worried that Hidekian would force the situation to an extreme. That would be terrible. Ling Shuang, Wuchen, and the others' expressions changed. They didn't expect Hidekian to show weakness. I will definitely investigate the massacre. If the truth is not what Fan Zhong said, the four-sect alliance will make the Feng Tian Fate sect pay the price, even if it means the survival of our sect. Hidekian's expression darkened and he spoke in a cold tone. Actually, at this moment, Hidekian had already calmed down and had his own judgment of the entire matter. Although, however, all the evidence pointed to the Feng Tian Fate sect. That was exactly why it was so strange. Think about it, if the Feng Tian Fate sect was the mastermind, why would they expose so much evidence and let the killers carry the Feng Wood badge? Wasn't this telling others that the Feng Tian Fate sect was the one who massacred the city? Moreover, the Feng Tian Fate sect had no reason to massacre the city. The grudge between the Feng Tian Fate sect and the Four-Sect Alliance was something that happened a long time ago. Ever since the Feng Tian Fate sect declined, both sides had minded their own business. It was even more unreasonable for the Feng Tian Fate sect to massacre the city just as the selection was about to begin. Feng Tian Fate sect. The Feng Tian Fate sect hoped for peace and stability more than anyone else, so why would they provoke the Four-Sect Alliance that posed no threat to them? After thinking about it, Hidekian felt that the mastermind behind this matter was most likely the Gia sect. Nye Tian let out a breath of turbid air, but his mood was not relaxed at all. He believed what Fan Zhong said, but he didn't think that the massacre was that simple. The Gia sect was indeed strong, but was it really strong enough to provoke the Feng Tian Fate sect, the Wind Demons clan, and the Four-Sect Alliance at the same time? Or perhaps there was an even greater force behind the Gia sect. Hidden Ye Tian vaguely sensed that an invisible giant hand had already covered the entire sacred world of cultivators. Not the seventh sacred world of cultivators would not be peaceful. Chapter 44-64. In the end, the three blades of the northern desert chose to leave before the Four-Sect Alliance arrived. The commotion was settled for now. Ling Shuang Wuchen signaled for the crowd to disperse and brought Nye Tian and the others to the meeting hall of Qingchen Peak. Field apart from the senior management of the Feng Tian sect, the Beacon's Emperor, Devil's Knight, and Qing Qi were also present. Fan Zhong, come out! Ling Shuang Wuchen shouted with a stern face. His aura was intimidating. Even though Nye Tian had returned, Ling Shuang Wuchen was still in charge of the overall situation. Moreover, when Fan Zhong's incident happened, Nye Tian had yet to return. Hence, Ling Shuang Wuchen blamed himself for it. Fan Zhong's face was pale. He stood up and glanced at Nye Tian from time to time. Do you know what you've done? Ling Shuang Wuchen's face was dark. His anger made him look like a ferocious lion. I know what I've done. Fan Zhong lowered his head and his voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Your crimes are unforgivable. Ling Shuang Wuchen's eyes were cold and murderous as he roared. Betraying the sect, colluding with external enemies, and attempting to overthrow the sect. Any one of these crimes was enough for Fan Zhong to die 10 times over. Sect leader. Fan Zhong could feel Ling Shuang Wuchen's murderous intent. His voice started to tremble. I know my crimes are unforgivable. I hope that Sect Master will give me a chance to redeem myself for my many years of dedication to the sect. Dedication? Redeem yourself? Ling Shuang Wuchen's eyes glowed coldly. He released an oppressive aura and roared, How dare you say that? Fan Zhong lowered his head even more, not daring to say another word. There was dead silence in the meeting hall. The atmosphere was heavy and suffocating. After a long while, Ling Shuang Wuchen glanced at the crowd and spoke again. Everyone, what do you think? Everyone avoided him. No one wanted to speak. Fan, the matter was too important. It was too difficult to speak properly at this time. But only one person stood up. It was the Sealing Cloud Flag Master, Shen Yunhe. Lord Sect Master, Fan Zhong colluded with the outer sect to betray the sect. His crime is unforgivable. In my opinion, he should be executed in front of everyone to straighten out the people's hearts. Shen Yunhe's face was cold and his aura was imposing. Ling Shuang Wuchen frowned and did not respond immediately. Instead, he paused and said, What do the others think? Of course, he knew that Fan Zhong and Shen Yunhe did not get along, and that Shen Yunhe could not wait for Fan Zhong to die. Therefore, Shen Yunhe's opinion was not of much use. Everyone fell silent once more. It was obvious that none of them wanted to speak. Before Ling Wuchen showed a clear attitude, no one dared to express their opinions. Sect leader Ling, I have something to say, but I'm not sure if I should say it. After a while, Gu Ling Wuji finally stood up. Even though he hadn't been in the sect for a long time, he was still the sect master, so his words still carried more weight. Brother Gu Ling, please speak. Ling Wuchen glanced at Gu Ling Wuchi and said in a strange tone. The Feng Tian Fate sect was different from other sections. There were 2 sect masters in the sect. Although they looked equal on the surface, their actual power was different. Just like now, Gu Ling Wuji had not been in the sect for a long time, and his status in the sect was much lower than Ling Wuchen. And moreover, the relationship between Ling Wuchen and Gu Ling Wuji was not harmonious to begin with. It wasn't that they had any personal grudges. It was just that they had many disagreements when it came to managing the sect. Gu Ling Wuchi had left the Feng Tianming sect partly because of Ling Wuchen. Now Ling Wuchen naturally had a different feeling in his heart when he suddenly returned from Gu Ling Wuji. And moreover, Ling Wuchen did not address Gu Ling Wuchi as the sect leader. He seemed to be avoiding the latter's identity. Ancient Ling Wuchi didn't seem to be surprised. He smiled and said, although the Tianyue flag master's betrayal of the sect is a heinous crime, he has indeed contributed to the sect all these years. Moreover, Tianyue flag master admitted everything on his own initiative in front of the Northern Desert Three Blades, which means that he is sincerely repentant. Under such circumstances, I believes that the sect might as well be magnanimous and give Tianyue flag master a chance to turn over a new leaf. After that, Gu Ling Wuji looked at Ling Wuchen, obviously observing the latter's reaction. Cold Wuchen's face was gloomy and cold. He seemed to be thinking about something. Sect leader Ling. At this moment, Nye Tian also stood up and said, I already knew about Fan Zhong. I even made a private agreement with him that as long as he repents and turns over a new leaf, the sect will let bygones be bygones. However, I didn't know about the 4-sect alliance back then. That's why I also feel that my decision was a bit rash. However, since I've already said it, it's not appropriate for me to take it back. Nye Tian paused and continued, I have a suggestion now. Why don't we let Fan Zhong stay by my side for now? After all, the upcoming Sky Beacon selection will require a lot of manpower. Fan Zhong will also be able to confront the Ghost Cliff sect in the future, he said. After that, Nye Tian looked at Ling Wuchen and waited for the latter's response. Although he was the Beacon Emperor, Ling Wuchen was in charge of everything in the sect, so he had to respect the latter's decision. Ling Wuchen was silent for a long time before he finally spoke. Since the Beacon Emperor already had an agreement with Fan Zhong, then Fan Zhong's life will be in his hands for now. Fan Zhong immediately bowed and thanked Ling Wuchen when he heard that Ling Wuchen had finally agreed to it. Nye Tian's eyes flickered slightly as the heavy stone in his heart was finally lifted. Now Ling Wuchen was still in charge of the Sky Beacon sect. If he insisted on killing Fan Zhong, there was nothing Nye Tian could do. Alright. Ling Wuchen was polite enough to Nye Tian and spared Fan Zhong's life. Otherwise, the atmosphere would definitely be awkward. Don't celebrate too early. Sparing your life doesn't mean you can escape punishment. Ling Wuchen looked at Fan Zhong coldly and said, From now on, I will usurp your position as the Flag Overlord and order you to protect the Beacon Emperor. If anything happens to Sir Beacon King during the selection, we will hold you responsible. That's right. Yes, yes, yes. Fan Zhong nodded repeatedly. Not only was he not upset, but he was also elated. Of previously, he was no longer a flag master, and he was also Nye Tian's bodyguard. However, after Ling Wuchen's announcement, it became official. Cold Wuchen shot a cold look at Fan Zhong, not the least bit relaxed. His original plan was to kill Fan Zhong no matter what. However, since Nye Tian had spoken, He had no choice but to take a step back. Nie Tian was the beacon emperor he had found. If even he did not admit it, how could he expect others to admit it? Fan Zhong's matter was temporarily put to rest. Receiving Shuang Wuchen looked at Devil's Knight and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" He had noticed the presence of Devil's Knight earlier and was very puzzled. Why did this person look so similar to Nie Tian? Even their auras were similar. Straight his intuition told him that Devil's Knight's identity was definitely not ordinary. Feng Tian Soul Sect, Beacon Emperor. The corner of Devil's Knight's mouth twitched into a faint smile. Chapter 4465. Devil's Knight revealed his identity with a playful smile. He looked at Ling Shuang Wuchen meaningfully. Ling Shuang Wuchen's expression changed when he heard the words Soul Sect, but it only lasted for a moment. Instead, he looked very calm. Nie Tian He and Gu Ling Wuji were surprised. They didn't expect Ling Shuang Wuchen to be so calm. It's surprising that Headmaster Ling is so calm. Devil's Knight's eyes darkened. He was also surprised. Beacon's Emperor, why did you come to the Fate Sect? Ling Shuang Wuchen looked indifferent, as if the Soul Sect and the Fate Sect had nothing to do with each other. Everyone's expression changed. Ling Shuang Wuchen seemed to want to chase Devil's Knight away. If that was the case, wouldn't the Fate Sect and the Soul Sect have a civil war before the Sky Beacon selection? Mo Devil's Knight frowned. He didn't expect Ling Shuang Wuchen to say that, but his expression remained calm. The Soul Sect and the Fate Sect are of the same origin. The Sky Beacon mountain range belongs to the Fengtian Sect, not the Fate Sect. As the Beacon's Emperor, it's not an exaggeration to say that I'm the master of the Sky Beacon mountain range. Why can't I come? Ever since the Soul Sect left the Sky Beacon mountain range, it has nothing to do with the Fengtian Sect and the Sky Beacon mountain range. Ling Shuang Wuchen's expression darkened. To the Fengtian Sect and the Fate Sect, you're at most a guest now. A guest. Devil's Knight smiled and turned to Nie Tian. Then ask him if I'm a guest or a master. Ling Shuang Wuchen's expression darkened. He also turned to Nie Tian. Devil's Knight looked very similar to Nie Tian. Their relationship was obviously not ordinary. The Beacon's Emperor's return this time is to facilitate the unification of the Fengtian Sect. Nie Tian's face was a little embarrassed, but there were no outsiders present, so he didn't hide it and said, "I think this is a good thing." As soon as his words fell, it immediately caused a heated discussion among the crowd. The Beacon's Emperor's sudden arrival is for the unification of the two sections. This is indeed a good thing. The Feng Tianming sect has been in decline for a long time. If we can unite with the Black Soul sect and return to the Feng Tian sect of the past, it will be a joyous occasion for the sect. However, this Beacon's Emperor's aura is not weak. Clearly, he is not someone who will bow down to anyone. I think he's probably here to fight for power. Yes, this fellow looks quite similar to our Beacon Emperor. Could he be Lord Beacon Emperor's brother? The hall was filled with the upper echelons of the Fengtian Fate sect. They spoke one after another without any taboo. Cold Shuang Wuchen's face was gloomy as if he was thinking. After a while, he said, "The Fate sect will naturally welcome the Black Soul sect's return, but if they want to dip their hands into the orthodox Fengtian sect, we will never agree." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. Ling Shuang Wuchen's reaction was within his expectations. He wanted to compete with Devil's Knight on equal footing, but Ling Shuang Wuchen obviously wouldn't agree. Cold Shuang Wuchen had painstakingly managed the Fengtian Fate sect for many years and had long regarded the Heavenly Beacon mountain range as the sect's land of inheritance. How could he hand it over to someone else? Orthodox? When Devil's Knight heard these two words, he couldn't help but sneer. He said, "It seems that in Sect Master Ling's eyes, the Fate sect is the orthodox Fengtian sect and represents the entire Fengtian sect, right? Isn't that so?" Ling Shuang Wuchen also sneered and directly rebuked, When the Black Soul sect left the heavenly beacon mountain range, it caused the Fengtian sect to split and the Fengtian sect to decline. You are the sinners of the Fengtian sect. It would not be an exaggeration to say that you are traitors of the sect. Knight's face instantly darkened, and he said indifferently, Sect Master Ling is really eloquent. But let me ask you, do you believe that the Black Soul sect is responsible for the decline of the Fengtian sect? Wasn't it your Fate sect that forced the Soul sect to leave? Ling Shuangwuchen said coldly, There's no point in arguing. I respect you as the beacon's emperor and can let you go freely. As long as the members of the Black Soul sect never set foot on the Heaven Beacon mountain range, the Life sect can pretend that the Black Soul sect never existed. Devil's Knight sneered and said, In that case, this emperor should thank sect leader Ling for his great kindness? Shuangwuchen's face was cold as he said to Xin Yunhe, Sect leader Xin, please send the guest off. Yunhe was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He stood up and said aggressively, Beacon's emperor, please. Feeling Xin Yunhe's aura, Heaven's expression turned even uglier. It was obvious that if Devil's Knight did not leave, Xin Yunhe would attack. As one of the 4 flag masters of the Fengtian Fate sect, Xin Yunhe was naturally very powerful. But Nie Tian had fought with Xin Yunhe before, and he knew that the latter's strength was comparable to that of the elders of the Gia sect. And Devil's Knight was the one who had refined the deputy sect master of the Gia sect into a soul puppet. If Xin Yunhe attacked, he would be the one at a disadvantage. Cold Shuangwuchen and Xin Yunhe clearly did not know Devil's Knight's strength. Otherwise, they would not have been so overbearing. What if I don't leave? At this moment, Devil's Knight's expression changed. His eyes were as deep as the abyss, releasing a strange darkness and a chilling aura. At this moment, Devil's Knight's aura seemed to have changed. Even though he was very close to them, they could not see his face clearly. What kind of power is this? Everyone felt that something was wrong and their expressions changed. Someone cried out, Good boy, it seems that I have underestimated you. Xin Yunhe's expression darkened, but he was not afraid at all. With a low growl, his aura surged. He was about to attack. Stop! But at this moment, Nie Tian suddenly shouted. His figure moved, and he stood between Devil's Knight and Xin Yunhe. Seeing that it was Nie Tian, Xin Yunhe was unwilling, but he still withdrew his aura. He had already seen Nie Tian's strength, and he did not want to offend this young beacon emperor again. Devil's Knight looked at Nie Tian and frowned. He hesitated for a while, but eventually returned to normal. Brat, consider yourself lucky. Xin Yunhe looked at Devil's Knight and sneered. As far as he was concerned, if Nie Tian hadn't stopped him just now, Mo Yi would have already died in his hands. Devil's Knight did not even look at him. Instead, he locked his gaze on Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, for your sake, I will let it go this time. The elders of the Soul sect will arrive in 3 days. Before they arrive, you better take care of the Life sect. Nie Tian frowned. He was in a dilemma. These are soul-cleansing pills. Let Tang 13 take one every day. It will be enough for him to survive. Devil's Knight did not give him time to react. He threw a bottle of pills at him and said, I will leave first. As he finished speaking, his figure leaped forward like a ghost and instantly disappeared without a trace. Present everyone's eyes were focused on Nie Tian. The atmosphere was very strange. Chapter 4466. Omega 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 choking with sobs. Novel in the main hall, everyone looked at Nie Tian with strange expressions. Of course, Nie Tian could feel the strange atmosphere, but he didn't know what to say. It was obvious that everyone wanted to know what was going on between Nie Tian and Devil's Knight. However, due to his status, they couldn't ask him directly. Cough, cough. After a while, a dry cough broke the silence. It was Guling Wuji. He stood up and said, I know about the Beacon's Emperor. If anyone has any questions, let I answer them. Everyone's eyes trembled. Many people turned to look at Gu Lingwuji, and their expressions became even stranger. Gu Lingwuji's identity was actually even more awkward than Ye Tian's. Although he was the sect leader, he had left the sect a long time ago. Not to say that he had separated himself from the sect, but his relationship with the sect had naturally become estranged. Now that he had suddenly returned to the sect, it would be very difficult for him to establish himself as the sect leader again. At the very least, it would be impossible for him to be on equal footing with Leng Shuang Wuchen. He hadn't even explained his own affairs clearly, but now he came out to help Nye Tian, making people feel like he was a clay bodhisattva trying to save someone. However, the crowd was still wary of Gu Lingwuji's identity, and did not say anything to his face. See, no one said anything, so Gu Lingwuji began to speak. He mainly talked about the situation at the Black Soul sect, the relationship between Devil's Knight and Nye Tian, and the prophecy he made when he visited the Black Soul sect. Deng, however, Gu Lingwuji did not reveal Devil's Knight's origins. After all, this was a rather secretive matter. After Guring Wuji finished speaking, Nye Tian also added on, including the gentleman's fight between him and Devil's Knight. After he finished speaking, the crowd immediately began to discuss. It turns out that after so many years, the Black Soul Divine sect has never given up. It seems like they've been scheming for a long time. Lord Beacon Emperor and the Beacon's Emperor, isn't it a little too reckless to decide on a gentleman's dispute? Although the people of the Black Soul sect weren't very strong, they were very proficient in formations, barriers, and prophecies. The Soul sect's prophecy regarding the Beacon Emperor couldn't be true, right? As he spoke, his expression became a little strange. Nyeheaven shook his head slightly and calmed down. He said in a clear voice, "I made a private agreement with the Beacon's Emperor without discussing it with everyone else. It was indeed a little rash. However, this was also a decision that I had made after careful consideration. We still don't know the strength of the Soul Ancestor. However, I have witnessed the strength of the Beacon's Emperor with my own eyes. It's definitely beyond your imagination." Beyond imagination? Shen Yunhe couldn't hold it in any longer and sneered. "A mere ninth heaven tribulation holy king, could it be that you're stronger than me?" Obviously, he was still holding a grudge against Nye Tian for stopping him from attacking Devil's Knight. "Does Flag Master Shen know Yanqing?" Nye Tian faintly smiled and asked. "The vice sect master of the Gia sect?" Shen Yunhe was startled. He didn't know why Nye Tian suddenly mentioned Yanqing. "Yes," Nye Tian's mouth twitched and he asked, "Flag Master Shen, do you think you're very strong compared to Yanqing?" Shen Yunhe's expression sank. He paused for a moment and said, "Yanqing is the vice sect master of the Ghost Cliff sect. Even in the entire sacred world of 7 cultivators, he's a top-notch expert. I naturally can't compare to him." "If you can't even compare to Yanqing, how can you compare to the Beacon's Emperor?" Nye Tianling smiled disdainfully. "What do you mean?" Shen Yunhe furrowed his brows and said with an embarrassed smile, "According to Lord Beacon Emperor, the Beacon's Emperor is stronger than the vice sect master of the Ghost Cliff sect." Shen Yunhe wasn't unfamiliar with Yanqing. Although he hadn't fought him before, he knew that the former was an expert in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. And the Beacon's Emperor was only in the 9th level of the Heavenly Tribulation. The two of them were 2 levels apart. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the difference between them was like the difference between heaven and earth. If someone said that the Beacon's Emperor was stronger than Yanqing, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. The crowd, everyone's expressions changed. They understood the meaning behind Nye Tian's words. "When I visited the Wind Demon's clan, I happened to meet Yanqing and the others from the Gia sect." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "The Wind Demon clan's leader suggested that the Fengtian sect and the Gia sect compete in 3 rounds. One of the 3 rounds was between the Beacon's Emperor and Yanqing." Everyone's gazes instantly became heated and they couldn't help but ask. Nye Tian glanced at everyone and said slowly, Yan Qing was defeated by the Beacon's emperor. He couldn't fight back at all. In the end, he was even refined by the Beacon's emperor into a soul lattice puppet. Everyone's eyes trembled violently. They all gasped and were stunned on the spot. A saint king in the 9th level of the heaven realm defeated a divine ancestor in the 9th level of the heaven realm and even refined the latter into a puppet. This was too shocking. This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Shin Yunhe was stunned for a long time. Then, he suddenly said, I think the Beacon Emperor is making up a lie to absolve himself. Everyone's expressions changed again, and they all looked at Shin Yunhe. No matter what, Nie Tian was still the Beacon Emperor. Shin Yunhe's words were blatantly disrespectful. Shin Yunhe had already offended Nie Tian before. If he offended him again, would he still have a place in the Feng Tian Fate sect in the future? Nie Tian was not angry at all. He had already expected Shin Yunhe to say this. He smiled faintly and said, If you don't believe me, you can ask Fan Zhong. You can also ask the Wind Demons clan. Do you think the Wind Demons clan will ally with the Feng Tian sect if we lose? Everyone's expressions froze. They didn't know what to say. With Nie Tian's status, he would not lie. However, Devil's Knight defeating Yan Qing was simply subverting their understanding of the martial way. Pieces after a while, when everyone had calmed down a little, Nie Tian said, This time, I represent the Life sect in choosing to compete fairly with the Soul sect. Although this is somewhat arbitrary, it is the best choice for the Life sect. First of all, the Sky Beacon selection is imminent. If the Fate sect chooses to break ties with the Soul sect now, it means that an internal conflict is inevitable. This will undoubtedly have a great impact on the Sky Beacon selection. Even if the Fate sect wins in the end, I'm afraid that their strength will be greatly reduced. Secondly, the Soul sect is not as weak as we think. In my opinion, I even think that the overall strength of the Soul sect has already surpassed that of the Fate sect. Thirdly, the Sky Beacon selection has already attracted the attention of too many forces. When the time comes, many unexpected things will definitely happen. If the Feng Tian sect wants to deal with all accidents, they must rely on the Sky Beacon formation. The Soul sect is more familiar with the Sky Beacon formation than us. Lastly, the Soul sect and the Fate sect have been divided for too long. It is time for them to unite. In my opinion, after the unification of the Feng Tian sect, whether it is the Fate sect or the Soul sect, it is a good thing for the entire sect. With that said, Nie Tian turned his gaze to Ling Shuang Wuchen and continued, Sect Leader Ling, I know that it is very difficult for you to accept the current situation. However, the Feng Tian sect is currently in a precarious situation. At this time, if the two sects cannot work together, then there is only one outcome that awaits us, destruction. Ling Shuang Wuchen's expression was incomparably solemn and his eyes were as deep as the abyss. I support the decision of the Beacon Emperor. After a long time, Ling Shuang Wuchen finally opened his mouth and nodded heavily. Baidu Search 881 Chinese Network Yen. No advertising words. Chapter 4467. In the meeting hall, Ling Shuang Wuchen finally agreed with Nie Tian's decision. This meant that the battle between the Life sect and the Soul sect had officially begun. 2 days later, at the Great Desolation Peak, Nie Tian and Tang 13 stood side by side in a hexagonal pavilion, looking at the other peak in the distance. Tang 13, how are you feeling? These days, Tang 13 had been taking a soul-cleansing pellet that Devil's Knight left behind. The soul of Yellow Spring in her body had stabilized and was no longer as violent as before. However, Nie Tian was still worried and asked, The soul of Yellow Spring has been suppressed. In at most half a month, I will be back to normal. Tang 13 smiled faintly. Seeing Nie Tian's nervousness, she joked, I didn't think that Devil's Knight would give you the soul-cleansing pellet so easily. It seems like he is just like you, he cares about me. Nie Tian smiled bitterly, but didn't say anything. Demon Yetian also felt strange that Knight would give up the soul-cleansing pellet so easily. Just for the sake of a joint breakthrough, Devil's Knight gave up Tang 13, his trump card? At first, Yetian suspected that there was something wrong with the soul-cleansing pellet that Devil's Knight gave, but he had no choice but to let Tang 13 take it. Who knew that the soul-cleansing pellet could really suppress the soul of Yellow Spring, and until now, it had not caused any harm to Tang 13. Maybe Devil's Knight really wanted to break through. In these 10 days, Yetian had tried to break through, but every time, he was beaten back by the Hidden Heavens perception barrier. Look, if he didn't cooperate with Devil's Knight, it would be very difficult for him to break through to the Heavens perception realm. Have you thought about the 3 people who will compete in the gentleman's competition? Tang 13 saw that Yetian did not speak and asked. Not yet. Yetian couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. He knew a lot of young genius martial artists. He had quite a few disciples, but it was difficult to contact Duanmu Lu and the others. Moreover, Yetian guessed that the strength of Duanmu Lu and the others would not be too strong. It was unlikely that they would be able to confront the people chosen by Devil's Knight. Yetian had a few candidates in mind, such as Earth Destruction Star Monarch Jun Jianxing, the ancient sacred race's prodigy Xie Tianquang, the Xiantian Sword Embryo Swordsman Yu Jingchen, the former Hidden Heavens champion Fu Tian Zhuxi, and even the Feng Tian Fate Sect's first disciple Wenlun. However, among these people, there were a few whose whereabouts were uncertain. He might not be able to contact them, and even if he managed to contact them, they might not be able to rush over in time. The Shura clan has some geniuses as well. I can ask a few of them for you to choose from. Tang 13 knew what Yetian was worried about. She said, if there is no other choice, I can fight. Yetian waved his hand and said, the person chosen by Devil's Knight must be a top genius. I'm afraid the intensity of the 3 battles won't be any weaker than the Hidden Heavens competition. Though there are many geniuses in the Shura clan, there might not be anyone who can handle this level of intensity. Your body is not stable yet, so it's best if you don't participate. Tang 13 bitterly smiled, her face full of helplessness. The Shura clan did have some geniuses, but almost none of them could meet Yetian's requirements. In the Hidden Heavens competition, other than Tang 13, only Sha Qianzhou of the Shura clan entered the top 8. The people Yetian wanted must be geniuses who could compete with him. Even if they couldn't compete, they couldn't be too far behind. Don't worry, the battles will have to wait until after the Sky Beacon selection. There is still time. Yetian didn't want Tang 13 to worry, so he smiled and pointed at a mountain gate opposite of him. Look over there, that hidden valley. Behind it is the 6th Sun Peak, the final location of the Sky Beacon selection. I heard from Grandmaster Qing Qi that the 6th Sun Peak is the forbidden peak of the Sky Beacon mountain range. It can't be damaged. Why was it chosen there? Tang 13 frowned and asked. It's precisely because the 6th Sun Peak is so important that it was chosen. Yetian smiled and said, I just asked. More than 1 million people have signed up for the Sky Beacon selection. This is even after increasing the registration limit. Aside from the cultivators from the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators, nearly 80% of the applicants are from other sacred worlds. Therefore, the Sky Beacon selection is no longer just a matter of the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators. It has alarmed the entire sacred world. In addition, the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators is extremely important. When the time comes, there will definitely be big forces intervening. In order to deal with unexpected situations, the final location of the Sky Beacon selection was chosen to be the 6th Sun Peak. As Yetian spoke, he looked around and smiled. Actually, the Great Desolation Peak we are at right now is also a forbidden peak. Although this location is remote, it is directly opposite the 6th Sun Peak. Moreover, it is very close to the guards of the 6th Sun Peak, so it is very important. I asked Senior Gu Ling to open the Great Desolation Peak so that we can better observe the Sixth Sun Peak. 13 nodded and smiled. It looks like we're really going to have a big battle this time. Beacon Emperor. As the two of them spoke, Gu Ling Wuji arrived and bowed to Nie Tian respectfully. Senior Gu Ling, you don't have to be so polite. Just call me Nie Tian. Nie Tian laughed and asked, how is the Sixth Sun Protection Formation? For the past few days, Gu Ling Wuqi and Qing Qi had been assisting the elders of the Black Soul sect in building the Six Suns Protection Formation to protect the Six Suns Peak. About 7 days ago, 3 elders of the Soul Divine sect arrived, and their strength was actually not weaker than Gu Ling Wuji and the others. By from this, it could be seen that the overall strength of the Soul sect might not be inferior to that of the Life sect. Not really. Moreover, the elders of the Black Soul Divine sect had brought with them all the materials needed to build the Great Formation. Even the blueprint of the formation had been completed a long time ago. Ancient Ling Wuqi and Qing Qi were only assisting to ensure that there were no problems with the formation. It's almost done. It'll be completed in 3 days at most. Elder Wang, Elder Qin, and Elder Sima are all formation experts. I and Qing Qi only need to assist from the side. Gu Ling Wuji was a little excited. Everything has been prepared. It looks like Devil's Knight has set his sights on Sixyang Peak in advance. Tang 13 laughed. She did not hold back and said directly, I think Devil's Knight's motive for choosing Six Suns Peak is not simple. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he asked, Senior Gu Ling, you and Senior Qing Qi have been keeping an eye on the Six Sun Protection Array. Is there any problem? Ling Wuqi naturally understood what Nie Tian was asking and said, there's absolutely no problem with the Six Sun Protection Grand Formation. I and Qing Qi have been keeping a close eye on it. No matter how brilliant the 3 elders of the Soul sect are, they can't hide from our eyes. Don't worry, Beacon Emperor. That's good. Nie Tian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He believed in Gu Ling Wuqi and Qing Qi's vigilance. Ancient Ling Wuqi smiled faintly and continued, Headmaster Ling is almost done with his work. All the applicants have been arranged, and we're just waiting for the Sky Beacon selection to begin. Have the venues for the primary and combat selections been chosen? Nie Tian asked in a much more relaxed manner. Everything has been chosen. Everything needed for the preliminary and martial selections has been prepared as well. Gu Ling Wuqi nodded with a smile and said, we're just waiting for the day of the Sky Beacon selection to be opened. Then, Beacon Emperor will light the 9 heavens beacon fire. Nie Tian nodded in satisfaction with a gratified expression. The Sky Beacon selection was only 5 days away and everything was ready. Chapter 4468. 5 days later, at the Fengtian sect's Sky Beacon Square, tens of thousands of people gathered like a surging tide. Today was the day of the Fengtian sect's Sky Beacon selection. Now there was no Sky Beacon Fate sect, only the Fengtian sect. As for the internal affairs of the Fengtian sect, they would have to wait until the end of the Sky Beacon selection. The Sky Beacon Square was located on the mountainside of the widest mountain range in the Sky Beacon mountain range. Looking down from above, one could clearly see that the entire Sky Beacon Square was in the shape of a horseshoe. It was surrounded by a layer of towering trees, looking extremely imposing. Speaking of which, ever since the decline of the Fengtian sect, the Sky Beacon Square had not been used for a long time. It was not that they did not want to use it, but that there was no need. This time, the Sky Beacon Square finally had a place to use the Sky Beacon selection. Fortunately, the Sky Beacon Square was big enough, or else it would not be able to accommodate millions of people. Inside the Sky Beacon Square, along the mountainside there were observation pavilions. This was the place that the Fengtian sect specially built for the Sky Beacon selection. The observation pavilions were divided into 9 floors. The first floor was relatively simple, but it was very spacious, enough to accommodate hundreds of people. The higher they went, the more luxurious and spacious the observation pavilions became. The observation pavilions on the 9th floor were like small courtyards, enough to accommodate thousands of people. These pavilions were prepared for the major forces that came to watch the battles. The more powerful an organization was, the more they could watch the battles from the observation pavilions on the higher floors. At this time, Nye Tian was standing in the center of the observation pavilions on the 9th floor, overlooking the crowd below. He could not help but feel a little excited. He did not expect that there would be so many people participating in the sky beacon selection. This was not only because the Fengtian sect had expanded the publicity of the sky beacon selection, but also because of the unique geographical location of the 7th sacred cultivator world. Ling Shuangwuchen stood beside Nye Tian and swept his gaze across the crowd below. His expression was even more excited than Nye Tian's. When he proposed the sky beacon selection, he only wanted to expand the influence of the Fengtian Fate sect and planned to recruit 1,000 disciples. After all, the Fengtian Fate sect only had tens of thousands of people left. However, a few days ago, the upper echelons of the Fengtian sect had a meeting and decided to recruit 30,000 new disciples. Ling Shuangwuchen vaguely felt that it was time for the Fengtian sect to rise. He seemed to have seen the Fengtian sect's revival in the future. Gu Lingwuji stood on the other side of Nye Tian. His eyes were full of vicissitudes and seemed to be wet. To be able to witness such a grand occasion for the Fengtian sect in his lifetime was truly gratifying. Lord Beacon Emperor, Sect Leader Ling, Sect Leader Guling, everything has been arranged. Xin Yunhe stepped forward and bowed to Nye Tian respectfully. At this moment, he was already wholeheartedly convinced by Nye Tian, and he didn't dare to go against him in the slightest and had an extremely obedient appearance. Have all the sects settled down? Ling Shuangwuchen's expression turned cold as he asked in a deep voice. This time, the sects that came to the Fengtian Fate sect to watch the battle were not only forces from the 7th sacred world of cultivators, but also various forces from other sacred worlds. There were even some great forces from top sacred world. If these forces were not properly settled down, it would be a great threat to the Fengtian sect. Sect Leader Ling, rest assured. All the forces have been placed in the observation pavilions according to their rank. Xin Yunhe nodded and excitedly explained his arrangements. It was not easy to offend the great forces, so it was not easy to settle them down. In particular, the observation pavilions were clearly divided into higher and lower levels. If a great force was placed in a lower pavilion, it would be troublesome. Therefore, in order not to offend these forces, Shen Yunhe secretly investigated the strength of each force and divided them into levels from 1 star to 9 stars for convenience. The 1-star forces were placed in the observation pavilions on the 1st floor, the 2-star forces in the observation pavilions on the 2nd floor, and so on. As for the local forces of the 7th sacred world of cultivators, they were given relatively preferential treatment and were placed in the observation pavilions on the 7th and 8th floors. Even forces like the Sacred Religious Religion, the Gia sect, the Wind Demons clan, the One clan, the Han clan, and the other forces were not as good as Shen Yunhe's classification of 8-star forces. However, they were all placed in the observation pavilions on the 8th floor. As for the Fengtian sect, as the absolute master, they were naturally placed in the center of the observation pavilions on the 9th floor. That's good. Ling Shuangwuchen was very satisfied with Shen Yunhe's arrangements and nodded in approval. Flag Master Shen, according to your statistics, which 9-star forces are there? Nye Tian looked at Shen Yunhe and asked with a faint smile. He was very curious about which great forces had come. Reporting to Sir Beacon Emperor, the 9-star forces this subordinate has calculated are basically first-rate forces from top sacred worlds. Shen Yunhe was very happy to see Nye Tian take the initiative to ask and said, "Currently, there are not many 9-star forces. There are 5 academies: the Angel Clan, the Dragon Clan, the Azura Clan, the Prison Clan, the Demon Clan, the Myriad Sound Demon Palace, the 2 Chambers of Commerce, and other forces. You have arranged it well. Nye Tian nodded slightly. He knew about these forces, but the forces that he was really concerned about did not appear. Did anyone from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion come? Gu Ling Wuji seemed to know what Nye Tian was thinking and asked directly. Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion? Shen Yunhe was stunned for a moment before shaking his head. No. He felt a little strange as to why Gu Ling Wuji would suddenly ask about the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. In his eyes, the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion was a behemoth that truly ruled over the all-heavens sacred world. Even if the Fengtian sect had caused a huge commotion, it should not have alarmed the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. I hope not. Gu Ling Wuji let out a long sigh, but his expression revealed a strong sense of worry. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion did not appear among the forces that were counted, but it did not mean that no one came. Perhaps someone from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion had already arrived, but they had been hiding. Nye Tian's eyes darkened slightly, and there was a deeper sense of worry in his eyes. Actually, he was not really afraid of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. What he was really worried about was the human emperor's palace behind the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. The current human emperor, Mu Jioge, was someone that Nye Tian had interacted with in the Yellow Springs sacred ground before. He was a peerless expert whose strength was not inferior to the Yang God Sword Emperor and the others. In the Yellow Springs sacred ground, Mu Jioge was only a clone, but he was able to easily suppress the sword devil Yin Fenghua. The strength of his original body was simply unimaginable. Judging from the current situation of the Fengtian selection, the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion would definitely intervene. As for whether the human emperor's palace would intervene, it would depend on the subsequent developments. Nye Tian, just as Nye Tian was deeply worried, a familiar voice was heard. It was Devil's Night. Behind Devil's Night, Puppet E and a few elders of the Soul Sect followed. Although the elders looked old, each of their auras were extremely profound, and they were not inferior to Puppet E. Now that the Life Sect and the Soul Sect were cooperating, they were on equal footing. Therefore, Nye Tian and Devil's Night stood side by side. Standing beside Devil's Night, Nye Tian suddenly realized that Devil's Night seemed to be slightly shorter than him, but he did not know why. Since the 2 Beacon Emperors are here, let's light the 9 Heavens beacon fire. Lung Shuang Wuchen's eyes were deep as he bowed slightly. Chapter 4469. The Flame of the 9 Heavens. The Flame of the 9 Heavens represented the hope and inheritance of the Fengtian sect. Whenever there was a major event, the Flame of the 9 Heavens must be lit first. Because the Flame of the 9 Heavens represented the most important thing of the Fengtian sect, only the Beacon Emperor was qualified to light the Flame of the 9 Heavens. And the Fengtian sect's first Beacon Emperor and second Beacon Emperor were too far apart in time, so the Flame of the 9 Heavens had not been lit for millions of years. During the time of the first Beacon Emperor, the Flame of the 9 Heavens had been lit 3 times. Once when the Fengtian sect was founded, once when the Fengtian sect reached the peak of the heavens, and once when the first Beacon Emperor fell. First during the 3rd time, the first Beacon Emperor fell, and the 2 sect masters at that time lit the Flame of the 9 Heavens. Since then, the Flame of the 9 Heavens had been extinguished. Strictly speaking, the importance of the beacon selection was not enough to start the Flame of the 9 Heavens ceremony. Only yes, the Flame of the 9 Heavens had been extinguished for too long, and the Fengtian sect had been in decline for too long. It really needed an exciting moment. Feng the Heaven selection coincided with the unification of the Fengtian sect, so it was suitable to light the Flame of the 9 Heavens. Please. Devil's Night smiled faintly. His words were polite, but he did not have the slightest intention of modesty. He directly stepped out and walked towards the beacon square. Nye Tian did not mind and immediately followed. They landed on the high platform in the center of the beacon square, one after another. Beacon Emperor! Beacon Emperor! Beacon Emperor! The moment the two figures landed, the disciples of the Sky Fengtian sect roared at the top of their lungs. Heaven's eye light scanned the audience and felt the excited atmosphere. He could not help but be moved, and a surge of emotions surged in his heart. Feng the Sky sect had been in decline for too long, and countless disciples were looking forward to this moment. The crowd's emotions were stirred, and their wills were united as a fortress. After a long time, the cheers of the crowd weakened, and the audience quieted down. "Let's begin." Devil's Knight glanced at Nie Tian and said without any nonsense. Nie Tian nodded and raised his hand. An extremely pure flame surged out from his palm. It was the Heaven Beacon flame. One beside him, Devil's Knight was the same. His palm surged with the Heaven Beacon flame, like a small fire snake, swimming and rolling. At this moment, everyone's gazes were fixed on the two of them with excitement and reverence. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Nie Tian and Devil's Knight used a strange footwork technique and formed hand seals at the same time. Suddenly, the Heaven Beacon flame spun in the air and spread out into a sea of fire on the high platform. Nie the heavenly eye light trembled as he stared at the high platform beneath his feet. Flame runes danced around like fire snakes, incomparably resplendent. Boom! Immediately afterward, a rumbling sound came from the ground. The high platform actually moved and began to rise slowly. Nie the heavenly eye light felt a natural aura spread out and instantly enveloped the entire Heaven Beacon square. Feeling the mighty aura, Nie Tian couldn't help but be shocked and speechless. The Heaven Beacon flame is the fire origin seed at the beginning of the world. It contains the purest life spirit energy. Devil's Knight seemed to be very familiar with the Heaven Beacon flame. While explaining, he grabbed a flame rune with one hand and swallowed it. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian couldn't help but be shocked. He could feel that the flame rune contained an extremely powerful and violent energy. Devil's Knight dared to directly swallow it. Wasn't he afraid of harming his martial body? Nie Tian, what are you waiting for? The moment the Heaven Beacon flame is ignited is the best time for us to break through to the Heavenly Eye Realm. Devil's Knight didn't feel any discomfort after swallowing the flame rune. Instead, he looked at Nie Tian with a strange smile. Only then did he react. Devil's Knight wanted to borrow the power of the Heaven Beacon flame to break through to the Heavenly Eye Realm. Nie Tian, this opportunity only comes once. Are you still hesitating? Seeing that Nie Tian didn't say anything, Devil's Knight crazily laughed. Nie Heaven's heart trembled. He immediately decided to break through together with Devil's Knight. He no longer hesitated. His palm surged with sword intent and directly grabbed the flame rune, forcefully absorbing it into his body. Boom! The moment the flame rune entered his body, Nie Tian felt his entire body shake. The pain of being burned instantly spread throughout his body. At the same time, the terrifying energy contained within the flame rune exploded. It was as if a flaming blade was piercing through his body, burning his soul and splitting his bones. Demon, seeing that Nie Tian had begun to move, Knight smiled in satisfaction and also began to crazily absorb the flame rune. Tongan, the next moment, the high platform rose up like a giant tree and soared into the sky. Gao around the platform, the Heaven Beacon flame continued to expand and condense, turning into 9 giant flame dragons that soared into the sky. On the Heaven Beacon square, countless Fengtian sect disciples were incomparably excited when they saw this scene. One after another, they released the power of their soul and life veins into the 9 giant flame dragons. Roar! After receiving the power of everyone, the 9 giant flame dragons immediately let out earth-shattering roars that resounded through the 9 heavens and cracked rock. The spectators that came to the Fengtian sect to watch the battle were shocked by the scene before them and started discussing. I didn't think that the Fengtian sect would still have such a foundation after being in decline for so long. With such momentum, it seems that the Fengtian sect isn't as weak as the rumors say. The heaven beacon flame is rising again. The seventh sacred world of cultivators is going to shake again. Everyone was shocked. They clearly didn't think that the Fengtian sect, which had been in decline for so long, would have such a huge momentum for a ceremony. Just while everyone was discussing, Nie Tian and Devil's Knight were on the high platform, jointly breaking through. They sat cross-legged as the power within their bodies crazily flowed and gathered on their origin meridians, trying to break through their limits. At this moment, Nie Tian could not only sense his 9 origin meridians, but he could also clearly sense Devil's Knight's 9 origin meridians. They had a tacit understanding and their auras were the same. At the same time, they circulated the power of the heavenly tribulation to break through their martial physique. Since the tearing pain of their martial physiques, coupled with the bone-eroding pain of the flames, made Nie Tian and Devil's Knight suffer unimaginable pain. However, both of them were people with strong willpower and didn't make the slightest sound. Soon, Nie Tian and Devil's Knight felt the heavenly perception barrier appear. Almost in an instant, both of them roared at the same time and the heavenly perception barrier was instantly broken. But they didn't relax at all because the first barrier was only the beginning. The real challenge was the hidden second barrier. Just as expected, the second barrier appeared the moment the heavenly perception barrier was broken. It was even bigger and covered their origin meridians. Their expressions changed at the same time because they discovered that the second barrier was much bigger than before. When they jointly broke through, the second barrier would also become bigger. The two of them took a deep breath and the fiend god power within their bodies erupted. They directly activated their fiend god physiques, and fiend god reverse runes covered their bodies. The moment the two of them activated their fiend god physiques, the 9 flaming dragons outside the high platform seemed to have sensed something strange. Pang Reng's body froze in the air, and his 9 flaming dragon eyes stared at Nie Tian and Devil's Knight. Chapter 4470. On the Sky Beacon Square, the 9 flaming dragons seemed to have sensed something strange. They all locked their gazes on Nie Tian and Devil's Knight. Sway_Meng below the square and in the observation pavilion on the first floor, everyone also saw Nie Tian and Devil's Knight. Their expressions became strange. What are they doing? Why aren't they leaving the Sky Beacon Tower? Look at them sitting cross-legged. They seem to be cultivating. No. Look at the light around their bodies. They're breaking through. While everyone was discussing, someone noticed Nie Tian and Devil's Knight trying to break through and immediately shouted. Who would have thought that Nie Tian and Devil's Knight would choose to break through at this time? At the center of the observation pavilion on the 9th floor. Breaking through in the Sky Beacon Flame? Are they courting death? Lung Shuang Wuchen looked at Nie Tian and Devil's Knight with a gloomy expression. Under normal circumstances, Nie Tian and Devil's Knight would leave the Sky Beacon Tower after igniting the Sky Beacon Tower. But they stayed on the Sky Beacon Tower to break through. Weren't they crazy? Lung Shuang Wuchen had never personally tested the Sky Beacon Flame, but he knew that it was an extremely unique life spirit flame. It contained an extremely violent life spirit power that could cause great damage to a martial artist's divine soul and lifeline. But looking at Nie Tian and Devil's Knight's actions, they seemed to be absorbing the Sky Beacon Flame in an attempt to use its power to break through to the heavenly perception realm. From the 9th level of heaven tribulation to the heavenly perception realm was a bottleneck for every martial artist. Even some genius martial artists needed to try many times to break through the barrier. However, Nie Tian and Mo Ye's talent was extraordinary. With their comprehension, they would be able to break through the heavenly perception barrier in 3 to 5 tries at most. Why would they choose to use such a dangerous method like absorbing the Sky Beacon Flame to break through? Coldling Shuang Wuchen really could not understand why Nie Tian and Devil's Knight would do this. On the other hand, Gu Ling Wuji's face was tense. He was obviously very nervous. He knew about Nye Tian's second heavenly perception barrier, and he also knew that Devil's Knight and Nye Tian were going to work together to break through, but he never imagined that the two would choose to do it on the beacon tower. Not to mention how dangerous the sky beacon flame was, just the fact that there were so many people watching was an extremely unstable factor for their breakthroughs. The faces of the others, such as Fan Zhong and Shin Yunhe, were gloomy and embarrassed. Only Qing Qi's eyes shone brilliantly, as if he was a bit excited, as if he was looking forward to something. When Nye Tian asked him about the second heavenly perception barrier, he knew how difficult it was for Nye Tian to break through to the heavenly perception realm. Very in his opinion, even if Nye Tian and Devil's Knight joined forces, they might not be able to break through the second barrier. Because he knew that Nye Tian and Devil's Knight were martial artists with the aptitude of a ruler. A ruler's talent represented a martial artist's supreme talent in the martial Tao. They had the possibility to become a ruler. Deng Hyakuten was a martial artist with the aptitude of a ruler when he was young. Qing Qi was not familiar with the ultimate martial evil sky, but he knew from the previous Starry Sky Saint Lord, Donghuang Jingrong, that when the ultimate martial evil sky broke through to the heavenly perception realm, they encountered great difficulties, and almost lost their lives in the process at least 3 times. In the end, it was only with the help of Donghuang Jingrong and the other 3 celestial sovereigns that Hyakuten broke through to the heavenly perception realm. After breaking through to the heavenly perception realm, Hyakuten's aptitude of a ruler began to show, and his strength increased at a frightening speed. That's all in the future, there's no need to mention it. Because of this, Qing Qi was deeply worried about how Nye Tian and Devil's Knight would break through to the heavenly perception realm. If they couldn't break through to the heavenly perception realm, then not only would their ruler's aptitude not be of help, but it would also become a huge hindrance. It was only when Qing Qi saw Nye Tian and Devil's Knight join forces to break through on the sky beacon tower that he suddenly realized that this was an opportunity for the two of them. Feng the Heaven Flame was a Fate Soul Flame. Although the power contained in it was violent, it could also stimulate the potential of Nye Tian and Devil's Knight's martial bodies to the limit. They were Nye Tian and Devil's Knight. One had the strongest fate providence, while the other had the strongest soul providence. They had the natural ability to fuse and absorb fate soul flames. Qing Qi believed that as long as Nye Tian and Devil's Knight could withstand the terrifying impact of the Heaven Beacon flame, they could use the power of the fate soul in the flame and the resonance between their fate souls to break through to the heavenly perception realm. Devil's Knight is indeed a heaven-defying genius. He can even think of such a method. Qing Qi couldn't help feeling excited, but his eyes that were staring at Devil's Knight became even colder. There was even a hint of killing intent in them. When he heard Nye Tian mention Devil's Knight for the first time, he could tell that the latter's potential surpassed Hyakuten's. Extreme Wu Xietian had already grown to the peak of the all-heaven sacred world. How terrifying would Devil's Knight be in the future? Extreme, there was no doubt that Devil's Knight would be Nye Tian's greatest enemy in the future. He was also Nye Tian's most threatening enemy. At the same time, on the beacon tower, Nye Tian and Devil's Knight suddenly felt that the 9 fiery dragons had become violent, as if they were hostile towards them. They began to spit dragon flames to burn them. Boom! Like a tidal wave, the dragon flames descended with a loud rumble. Nye Tian couldn't help but sway slightly. At the same time, the raging dragon flame power entered his body, making him feel as if every drop of his blood was madly burning. Nye Tian had 10 fate meridians. His life force was strong and he could withstand such an impact. But Devil's Knight couldn't. He was drenched in sweat. Apart from the divine demon inscriptions on his body, there were also murky black wounds on his body. Blood was flowing out wildly. Devil's Knight, are you all right? Nye Tian could feel that Devil's Knight's breathing was a little unstable. He couldn't help but worry. I'm fine. Take care of yourself, Devil's Knight replied coldly. It was as if the murky black wounds didn't hurt him at all. Nye Tian frowned and didn't say anything. At that moment, as the dragon flames entered his body, Nye Tian felt the power in his body surging. It was as if every drop of blood, every meridian, and every piece of bone was filled with powerful fate force. The same thing happened to Devil's Knight. The two of them felt the fate force in their bodies skyrocketing. It instantly reached a limit and roared in their bodies like volcanoes that were about to erupt. Qing Qi looked at the two of them from afar and carefully felt the fluctuations of their auras. He had a premonition that the opportunity for a breakthrough was near. His heart was in his throat and he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. This is the time. Break. After a while, Nye Tian and Devil's Knight felt the opportunity to break through at the same time. They shouted in their hearts and immediately the fate force in their bodies exploded. Boom! Boom! In the next moment their bodies shook at the same time. Then, they each released a burst of extreme fate force. With the same rhythm, their fate souls resonated. Boom! Boom! Then, two muffled cracking sounds were heard. The second heavenly vision barrier in Nye Tian and Devil's Knight's body was broken. Chapter 44-71. Everyone's attention was focused on the beacon sky tower. Boom! Boom! Accompanied by the sound of breaking barriers within Nye Tian and Devil's Knight's bodies, two powerful auras tore through the sky. The two auras soared into the sky like giant dragons, blotting out the sun and moon. One in the blink of an eye, everyone was enveloped by a powerful aura. The world in front of them seemed to have changed. Heaven and earth resonated, and everything changed. Under the influence of this aura, everyone felt as if they had entered a different world. Loud and distant rumbles resounded in their ears. The scene in front of them changed rapidly. Heaven and earth changed, the stars moved, and all living things changed. Some people were stunned, not knowing what was happening. Only Qing Qi was the only one who managed to maintain a bit of consciousness, but the shock in his heart was indescribable. He knew that this was the talent of a sovereign, the enlightenment of breaking through the heavens. Although he had already predicted that Nye Tian and Devil's Knight would borrow the power of the beacon sky flame to break through to the heavenly perception realm. But when it really happened, he was still shocked. The resonance of heaven and earth caused by Nye Tian and Devil's Knight made him even more emotional. And at this time, 7 colored halos appeared on the tower, pouring down like a waterfall. They enveloped Nye Tian and Devil's Knight, forming a giant humanoid figure. The humanoid figure stood between heaven and earth, tall and dignified, as if it was declaring that it was the ruler of this world. The sovereign's physique. Qing Qi's eyes were blazing. Looking at the giant figure, he was shocked. After a long time, the sovereign's physique figure slowly disappeared, and everyone reacted. The beacon sky tower was extinguished. Nye Tian and Devil's Knight stood up. Although they were restraining their auras, they couldn't hide their sharpness. I finally broke through. Devil's Knight let out a long breath. The wounds on his body were healed, and he seemed excited. Together, they borrowed the power of the heaven beacon flame and finally broke through to the heavenly perception realm. At that time, both of them would be first-tier heaven enlightenment saint emperors. Nye Heaven was equally excited. The joy in his eyes was hard to conceal. He felt that his martial body had been greatly improved, and his strength had increased several times compared to before. Now even if he didn't activate his god-devil body, he could still fight against ordinary sky martial divine ancestors. Everyone looked at the two people on the high platform with a complicated expression. In that short moment, everyone was a little absent-minded, not knowing what had happened. Qing Qi was the only one who had seen the physique of a sovereign. What happened just now? Why do I feel like so many years have passed? Was this the power of the Fengtian Sect's fire of the ninth heaven? Could it cause people to fall into an illusion? I don't think it's because of the 9 heavens beacon fire. Look at the 2 beacon emperors of the Fengtian sect. They seem to have broken through. Could the phenomenon just now be caused by their breakthroughs? How is that possible? They've only broken through to the heavenly enlightenment realm. There's no way they could cause such a huge phenomenon. It must be the power of the 9 heavens beacon fire. Everyone discussed. They didn't think that the phenomenon was caused by Nye Tian and Devil's Night. They felt that the 9 heavens beacon fire was the cause of the illusion. Qing Qi smiled faintly and didn't speak for a long time. Brother Qing, what happened just now? Although Gu Ling Wuji didn't know what happened, he felt that something was amiss. It's nothing. Nye Tian and Gu Ling Wuji's breakthrough to the heavenly enlightenment realm caused some phenomenon. Qing Qi smiled faintly and didn't explain in detail. Heaven and earth phenomenon? Gu Ling Wuji was shocked. That was not an ordinary heaven and earth phenomenon. He knew that Nye Tian and Devil's Night had encountered the second barrier when they broke through to the heavenly enlightenment realm. But he didn't expect that the two of them could cause such a huge phenomenon just by breaking through to the heavenly enlightenment realm. On the high platform, Nye Tian took a deep breath and was about to walk down. Nye Tian, do you know what the ruler's endowment is? Devil's Night suddenly asked. I don't know. Nye Tian went blank for a moment before shaking his head. He had heard Qing Qi mention it before, but Qing Qi didn't explain. It seemed that even Fat Cat didn't know what the ruler's endowment meant. The ruler's endowment is simply the talent to become a ruler. Devil's Knight's lips twitched. But what is a ruler? A ruler? Nye Tian frowned and smiled. A ruler of the sacred world? Or a ruler of heaven and earth? A ruler decides life and death, rules over the world, and is a ruler. Devil's Night looked at Nye Tian with a strange look in his eyes. There are 9 rulers who rule the universe, but in the end, only one person could become the supreme one. I wonder, in the end, will the supreme ruler be you or me? With that, Devil's Night stepped forward and turned into a ray of light, jumping off the sky beacon platform. Nye Tian was confused. He didn't know what Devil's Night was talking about. It seemed that a ruler was someone who ruled over the world. There were 9 rulers, but only one could become the strongest. Demon Knight's words weren't an explanation, but it was more of a challenge. Nye Tian didn't know if he could become the strongest ruler, but he knew that between him and Devil's Night, only one could survive. With a laugh, Nye Tian turned around and returned to the viewing pavilion. The 9 heavens beacon fire was lit, indicating the official start of the sky beacon selection. The sky beacon selection was divided into 3 stages: the preliminary, the martial selection, and the final selection. Each stage lasted around 10 days. First was the preliminary stage. All the martial artists participating in the sky beacon selection would enter the sky beacon path. Those who could finish the path would be considered to have passed. Second was the martial selection. All the martial artists who passed the preliminary stage would be divided into groups according to age and strength. Then they would compete in martial arts. 30,000 people would be the final disciples of the sky beacon selection. Third was the martial selection. 30,000 disciples would enter the 6 Suns Peak to compete in martial art. The top 1,000 in terms of strength and talent would awaken their lifelines and soul veins on the 6 Suns Peak. Third, the 4th stage would last for around a month. Sir Beacon Emperor, everything is ready. The sky beacon path can be opened at any time. Xin Yunhe came to Nye Tian's side and bowed slightly. Before Nye Tian could say anything, Mo Yi, who was standing next to him, smiled faintly and signaled for him to start the path of flame heaven. Yes. Xin Yunhe glanced at Devil's Night and nodded respectfully. Then, Ling Shuang Wuchen, Gu Ling Wuji, Xin Yunhe, and the 3 elders of the Soul Sect left and landed on the high platform outside the Sky Beacon Plaza. The 6 of them pressed the switch of the formation on the high platform at the same time. Immediately, the 6 high platforms released a huge force that soared into the sky like a giant dragon. Rumble! Following this, a huge rumbling sound could be heard from the bottom of the 6 platforms as an underground door appeared. Then, 6 flights of stairs extended out from the 6 enormous doors, which extended into the sky like long snake. Chapter 44-72. On the Sky Beacon Plaza, the path of Beacon Heaven opened. Everyone was amazed by the spectacular scene in the sky. Boom! 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 Accompanied by a deafening roar, the 6 stairs connected in the sky like 6 giant dragons. It was extremely spectacular. I didn't expect the path of Beacon Heaven to be like this. Nye Tian was amazed as he looked at the path of Beacon Heaven that was about to be completed. He originally thought that the path of Beacon Heaven was a dangerous mystic realm that required martial artists to enter and exit safely. The path of Beacon Heaven has existed since the founding of the Fengtian sect. It was the most important method for the Fengtian sect to select disciples. Gu Ling Wuji stood next to Nye Tian and smiled faintly. It is said that the original path of Beacon Heaven did not only have 6 stairs, but dozens of stairs and countless pillars that were powered by the flame of Beacon Heaven to form 9 levels of the path of Beacon Heaven. 9 levels of the path of Beacon Heaven. Nye Tian's eyes trembled as he exclaimed. In his opinion, it was not easy to completely connect the 6 stairs. If there were dozens of stairs and many pillars to form 9 levels of the path of Beacon Heaven, it would be too complicated. Look, the previous generation of experts who came to the Fengtian sect were extremely proficient in formations and barriers. This was not surprising. After all, the early Fengtian sect martial artists were all people who cultivated both their fate souls. With the help of their fate matrix, it was normal for them to have high attainments in formations and barriers. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and could not help but smile bitterly. What we are seeing now is only one level of the path of Beacon Heaven. Back then, the complete path of Beacon Heaven was nearly 1,000,000 meters high. It was truly a path to the sky. However, the path of Beacon Heaven is too difficult. Those who can complete all 9 levels are peerless geniuses that only appear once in 1,000,000 years. When the Fengtian sect was at its peak, nearly 10 million people participated in the Beacon Heaven selection. Those who could complete all 9 levels could be counted on one hand. Nye Tian's eyes trembled violently when he heard this. He was quite shocked. 1,000. There were more than 10,000 people, but no more than 5 people had completed the 9 levels of Sky Beacon. One could see how difficult it was. If the 9-winged Sky Beacon was still around, Nye Tian wouldn't be able to resist going up there. Ancient Ling Wuchi nodded again and continued. Back then, the Fengtian sect was extremely strict in recruiting disciples. Only those who could reach the 5th level of the 9 levels of Sky Beacon and above were qualified to join the sect. However, as the Fengtian sect grew weaker and weaker, the number of participants decreased every time the Sky Beacon selection was held. Later on, there was the most miserable Sky Beacon selection. There were less than 1,000 participants, and only one person managed to reach the 5th level. Nye Tian's expression froze and he was at a loss for words. The difference between the Sky sect's golden age and the Sky sect's weakest was so great that it was simply unacceptable. For a sect to rise, it might take tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. But once it fell, it would only take tens of thousands of years or even thousands of years. Tree thousands of feet tall and reaching into the clouds required countless years of accumulation, but if it collapsed, it would only take one night. Gu Ling Wuchi's eyes flickered as he lamented. Because there were fewer and fewer participants, the Fengtian sect decided to lower the difficulty of the Sky Beacon selection. They removed the 9 levels of Sky Beacon and only kept the last level. Then, they continued to use the formation of the 9 levels of Sky Beacon and modified the last level into a miniature 9 levels of Sky Beacon. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. As expected, he found that the heaven stairway on the Sky Beacon path was clearly divided into 9 parts, the miniature 9 levels of Sky Beacon. Based on the current difficulty of the Sky Beacon path, how many people will be able to complete it? Nie Tian glanced at Gu Ling Wuqi and couldn't help but ask. Around 1/10. Gu Ling Wuqi thought for a moment and nodded. 1/10. Nie Tian murmured in a low voice. In other words, among the more than 1 million young martial artists who participated in the selection, only about 100,000 will be able to pass the preliminary selection. Yes. Gu Ling Wuqi nodded and said, I didn't expect so many people to participate in the Sky Beacon selection this time. If I had known earlier, I might have modified the Sky Beacon path to slightly increase the difficulty. That's good. There's still the martial selection and the final selection. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He was looking forward to the performance of the participant. Boom, boom, boom. While the two were talking, several dull sounds of collisions rang out. The entire Sky Beacon path was connected and a huge platform appeared where the 6 heaven stairways converged. All participants could enter the Sky Beacon path from any of the 6 heaven stairways. Those who could step onto the central platform would be considered to have passed the test. Nie Tian saw that the entrances to the 6 heaven stairways were already crowded with martial artists. Everyone was excited and eager to try. Let's begin. Devil's Knight said lightly as if he was also looking forward to it. Nie Tian nodded and signaled for Xin Yunhe to begin. Xin Yunhe immediately informed the people guarding the entrances of the 6 stairways to heaven to slowly open the entrances. Whoosh! A moment later, the entrances to the sky stairways opened. Countless people surged into the 6 heaven stairways like a tidal wave. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He saw countless people scrambling to the heaven stairways and running along the heaven stairways. These 6 heavenly stairs were created by the ancestors of the Sky Feng sect. Every step was augmented with a special restriction. Upon entering the heavenly stairs, everyone's strength will be suppressed to the most basic level of cultivation, the Yuan Meridian realm. Gu Ling Wuqi looked at the people on the heaven stairways and introduced, those who are slightly stronger will at most have an advantage in martial physique. Other than that, everyone is almost equal. Yes. Nie Tian nodded. He had already noticed this. Yes. Most of the formations that tested a martial artist's talent and perseverance would have similar settings. This way, the Sky Beacon path focused more on a martial artist's talent and perseverance rather than strength. Gu Ling Wuqi smiled faintly and continued, other than the normal restrictions that suppress a martial artist's cultivation, the heaven stairways also have some special restrictions that focus more on testing a martial artist's fate and soul latent talent. Normally, if a martial artist's talent for both their fate and soul latent talent is very weak, it will be very difficult to pass the Sky Beacon path, no matter how strong their bloodline talent and perseverance are. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. This setting was very normal. After all, the Feng Tian sect was a sect that focused on cultivating dual fate and soul latent talent. That kid's talent is not bad. He basically didn't stop along the way and is about to reach the high platform. At this time, Gu Ling Wuqi noticed a figure on one of the heaven stairways and couldn't help but praise. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he also noticed that figure. Although the Sky Beacon path was a weakened version of the Sky Beacon path, it was still very difficult to pass. Normal martial artists would slow down at the 5th level of the Sky Beacon path. But that figure actually reached the 9th level in one go. There was no stagnation at all and his speed didn't even decrease. He stepped on it. Gu Ling Wuqi's eyes trembled. He couldn't help but exclaim when he saw that figure step on it. With such talent, even if he faced the real Sky Beacon path, he would have a chance to reach the 9th level.